Hello, everybody, and welcome to the MinnMax Show, a place about games, friends, and getting better. I'm Ben Hansen, joined by Jeff Marchiafava himself.
Hey!
We have Cyril Vasquez in the corner.
Hey!
And then we're joined by special guest Jacob Geller.
In the other corner.
In the other corner, Jacob Geller.
Four corners.
Former Game Informer intern, current YouTube essayist. Is that the best way to describe you? How do you like to be described?
Essayist sounds weird to anyone who hasn't seen a YouTube essay before, but I like it, so sure, yeah, I'll take it.
What? How many hours a week are you working on your YouTube stuff?
Probably, I don't know, 25 to 30.
Okay. And
I have another job, so it's not a full-time gig, but it feels like one.
Yeah, how's it going over there?
Good. I'm excited. I filmed. Here's something you'll maybe appreciate. I kind of did a less scripted top games of the year video that I was just like, I'm just gonna start a camera rolling and see how this goes. And it was so much easier to make than the hyper edited, hyper scripted things that I usually do. And I'm like, Oh my gosh, I can finish this in 3 days.
God, you're underselling yourself. I think for some people that's comfortable. For other people that would be a nightmare. I don't know, Jeff, if you and Cyril remember last year, but when we tried to do just record our simple top 10s, just okay, we'll just look at the camera and just explain my number 8, my number 7. And this isn't pointing fingers at you guys. It was just a full meltdown of I cannot do this format. When you have something that should be scripted and then you say, just wing it. It's impossible. Yeah. You can't be in the middle ground. You need to have a fully freeform podcast like this, or I need to have every pause, every joke written, or else I'm just lost.
I think the biggest struggle for us there was that it was supposed to be off the cuff, but also really short. So
right.
So having what are the 2 best sentences you can say right now about this game? That was definitely the hardest part versus something where it's just going on for as long as you want to about a game. I think would probably be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it's conversational, it's totally fine. But if it's the type of thing where you can't have any ums or ahs in it, then you're totally screwed. And I just need it written down so I can read it.
What do y'all want to do this year? Obviously, we're going to have our huge Game of the Year discussion. We're going to air everything, including the categories, everything with all the cohorts here. And that'll be coming up in the back half of December. But then for our personal top 10 lists, what format do you guys want? How should we do it?
Still do the same thing that murdered us last year, but
okay, yeah, maybe
I liked it.
Make it
as a viewer. I really enjoyed watching those, so it didn't feel like a meltdown.
Oh, good, thanks. Yeah, the power of editing.
It didn't feel like a meltdown. That's the review we want.
It's most of our YouTube comments. This is borderline meltdown, but I guess this is fine. But hey, we have a big show. We're announcing something big, and then we're going to be talking about Immortals Fenyx Rising, the new Ubisoft game, and then it's going to be a fun, huge conversation about the most underappreciated games of 2020, otherwise known as some hidden gems. I consider myself a bit of a video game expert, if I may, and I was amazed by how many people from the community in particular wrote in with some amazing suggestions that were completely off my radar. So you will find something to play in that discussion, I promise. Then we might do a little predicting of the Game Awards, which are coming up December 10th. We'll see who's the closest for who's going to win Game of the Year. And then back half of the show, we have wonderful community questions that people submitted on Patreon. Okay, we should announce something else. Coming up soon, there's a game coming out. And it's a game that is hotly anticipated. It's been anticipated for many years, I would say, probably 7 years. And we're debating whether or not we embrace it and fully tackle it with the deepest dive. And eventually it's got to the point where it's we can't not do it. We can't not do Cyberpunk 2077 for the deepest dive. So that will be the next deepest dive. The game comes out December 10th. The first discussion of Cyberpunk 2077 will be airing on December 16th, but we're going to need your feedback and comments by December 14th. So if you're going to be playing along with us, you're going to be playing Cyberpunk 2077, we encourage you to support us on Patreon. Submit a comment for us to read for our gigantic group discussion. We'll have a post up on Patreon on the 14th. And Jeff, you might be asking,
What's Cyberpunk 2077?
What is Cyberpunk? I assume everyone's on board.
When do we stop playing?
When do you stop playing? It's very handy that there is a wonderful place to stop. I haven't started this game, by the way, full disclosure. But I hear that it's broken up into acts, which is very easy to read for the starting and stopping points for the deepest dive. So stop at the end of Act 1. You will see on the screen Act 2 or start of Act 2, or it might be glitching on the screen. I don't know what it looks like exactly.
It'll say flip the tape
That's
over.
right.
So
That's
and
when you
side
stop.
B.
Yes.
Icon tells you to put in the next Blu-ray disc.
But yes, that's going to be roughly within the first 10 hours of the game, but you can probably spend a lot of time with that. So all experience welcome. So we're looking forward to creating the best, most thorough discussion of Cyberpunk 2077 on the internet with the deepest dive. But even just saying that is making my skin crawl a little bit. But I believe it's going to be Jeffem and Suriel and Leo and I trekking out on that adventure, and we'll see who survives and who doesn't. Suriel, where's your hype level at for Cyberpunk?
I'll survive is sort of where I'm putting myself. I think I'll live at the end of this, but I'm kind of mixed on it. I'm pretty excited about it, kind of like as this thing, as like the sequel to, well, not the sequel, but like the follow-up to The Witcher 3, which is one of my favorite games of all time. But yeah. I do think that like the discourse around that game, I am definitely I expect to be a minefield in a lot of ways, of just like people having the regular, gamer reactions of anything you say is either going to be like you're the worst or you're like whatever. And also that game has, met with several issues along the way, both kind of like the delay based and in terms of like the culture around that game, some of the stuff that's been in the marketing. So like it's a conversation that I think we should have, but I'm looking forward to playing it, if nothing else.
There's definitely going to be a lot to talk about. So that's going to be the objective there with the deepest dive in Cyberpunk 2077. And that's going to be a standalone video on our YouTube channel. And then you can also unlock the podcast version if you support us at that $5 tier on Patreon. So we look forward to folks joining the adventure. Jacob Geller, I think you were the first person I saw on Twitter say, "Huzzah! Immortals Fenyx Rising is cool!" And that stood out. And just for the full cap, I've played like 6 hours here. Jeffem's played 20 hours or so. And then Suriel, you actually reviewed it for GameSpot, right?
Yeah, I've played it for a little over 30 hours. But I finished it, did most of the side stuff, did like most of the major side quests. Didn't like tick off every icon, which, like, spoilers, it's one of those games. But I've done, I think I have a good understanding of what that game is at this point.
Yeah, you ended up giving it a 7. How long did it take you to finish?
I was basically it would have taken me probably a lot less time if I hadn't gotten into this groove of just going to the closest objective marker all the time. But probably if I hadn't done that, probably around 20 hours.
Okay.
But I think an additional 10 hours of just like kind of exploring around and doing a lot of the side stuff for sure. Sure.
Just setting the table, getting this out of the way. This is the open world, very Breath of the Wild inspired game from Ubisoft, originally called Gods and Monsters. Originally was supposed to debut in February of this year, was delayed, reworked a little bit, now called Immortals Fenyx Rising. Jacob Geller, what do you think about this whole thing?
So I should say, Ubisoft gave me a copy. They actually, some behind the scenes stuff, they gave it to a lot of YouTubers, I think, which is kind of unusual. Like, I don't get that many codes for bigger games, and I got this one. I was not planning on buying this game. I thought the trailers looked bad. I was just not particularly interested in it. And so maybe because my expectations were kind of on the floor, I have been really, really surprised in just how much I enjoy it. I think the Breath of the Wild comparisons are unavoidable. It is almost every element of this game feels incredibly Breath of the Wildy, except with the kind of Ubisoft, just the layer of what they're doing over it.
Yeah.
And so it feels a little like a Breath of the Wild by committee, but it turns out like it still works, even though I feel like it doesn't have the soul of Zelda, really. I don't feel emotionally connected to the world in really any way. it's just fun. And that kind of loop of like climbing to a high place and seeing something interesting and gliding off towards it is really addicting.
I think specifically you nailed it there, saying the gliding, like having that maneuverability in this world is so fun to basically have the hang glider again, just flying around with the wings now. Wings of Daedalus, is that what we're talking about? This is Greek mythology if you haven't been catching up with Immortals Fenyx Rising. I'm with you. I've been playing it, and it's just that moment of like, I bet there's going to be a lot of people that'll just say, poo-poo, Ubisoft just wanted to rip off Breath of the Wild, moving on. But it's like, am I going to have to be the one to stand up for this game in the industry? Like, I feel like years from now, we'll look back on this and be like, hey, that was cool. You got to give it up for Ubisoft going for a new IP and doing my favorite thing, which is letting them take a team like Ubisoft Quebec, who last made Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which just came out in 2018, taking a lot of the leads from that team and then saying, hey, just kind of rework some of that Greek stuff and pump out a whole new IP. And for them to turn that around in 2 years is amazing. I think we should celebrate just Ubisoft at least swinging for it and them going for something different. That is a fun game so far.
I mean, I know you've talked about for years, like, when are people going to start doing Breath of the Wild? And we've seen little stuff, you know, like a short hike was kind of like Breath of the Wild, or lots of other games. But this is the only one that I've played so far that feels anywhere close to the same scale. You know, that the world is incredibly dense with puzzles in the same way, and even more so than Zelda was doing. You know, they just had the money. Like, they just had the kind of like production staff to put something at that big of a scale together.
Yeah, the staff and the skills. After all these years of pumping out AC, they can just apply that to something newish and really crank this thing out. The puzzles is a huge talking point as well. I mean, I was amazed how many puzzles are in this game. If you love pressure plates, boy, is Immortals Fenyx Rising the game for you, because oh my God, are there a lot in this game.
It's very much like a normal, you know, Ubisoft kind of open world game, except all those little things on your mini map are basically puzzles, and most of them are interesting enough. Like there hasn't been an activity where I'm like, I did one of those and I don't want to do those anymore.
Yeah.
And part of that is I think the puzzles are interesting, and then I like the treasures that you're getting. Like, almost everything has a weapon or, you know, some kind of piece of armor or something that has like another passive different stat to it. And that feels more satisfying to me than, and one of my biggest complaints about Breath of the Wild was because you were getting, I know Breath of the Wild fans hate that you even bring it up, but because all your weapons and stuff always broke, it was always a huge bummer to me when I'd open a chest and I'd get a sword and it's like, this looks cool, it's stronger than what I have, but it's only going to last a couple fights and then I'm not going to have it anymore.
Yeah. Well,
and here it's like,
okay.
What?
Never mind. I was going to argue for breakable weapons, but it's fine. Move on.
And here, when you get a new weapon and it has a different buffs on it and you can upgrade it and you know that you have it, and you can like switch the cut, even you can just switch the aesthetic to a different aesthetic when you get them and still keep the same, you know, buffs of a different weapon and stuff. Like, that to me feels more rewarding.
Yeah, I will say that, like, for me, as I played more and more of it, those rewards do kind of start falling off in that you are getting way more cosmetic stuff than you are getting anything with a tangible benefit.
Yeah.
Where, like, you know, I have like three, like I'll get like one piece of armor that's like, oh, this one kind of makes it look like this is like a foresty type with like some leaves growing out of it, and then you'll get like 3 different colors of that same chest. So by the end of it, like, I do feel like the rewards weren't crazy enticing, but I think that the thing that I like about a lot of these puzzles is that they don't feel like busy work. It's not like even among Ubisoft open world games, this one feels rewarding just because the thing that you are doing is not just like, okay, go, like, here's a quest line, you see a cutscene and then the character needs, I need you to go collect 3 pieces of wood to build my house or whatever, and then you, like, the thing is just go to this piece of wood, bring them back to the caregiver, thanks for helping me build my house, seal, like, quest done, right? You are actually doing things that are satisfying in and of themselves regardless of the reward. Which is the thing that I enjoyed about that game most.
Yeah, I think the puzzles hit this really good medium of, I would consider myself bad at puzzles in video games. Like I am not a particularly smart player in this arena, but they always seem to hit for me. It's like I'm looking around, I can't quite figure it out. I'm turning to leave, and when I turn, there's the lever that I hadn't seen, and then I realized that like that opens, like this laser grid, and then I can hit it, and it's really kind of impressive how many times I've felt this like I'm almost gonna give up on this, and then I see the one thing that I need, and for me that's been just like a very kind of intrinsically rewarding loop of like, even though you're basically just lighting torches or putting things on pressure pads or whatever, they are different enough that I have continued to have fun with them, even though I've done, dozens at this point.
Yeah, it is we should mention too, I mean, these puzzles are largely taking place in, Tartarus, where it's basically the shrines from Breath of the Wild. We're going to a place with kind of a similar color palette design. It's just like, okay, here is a bite-sized little puzzle. Try and complete this. I think the only one that I had where I was like really scratching my head so far is that one where you just have to like ram the rocks into the walls. And it's basically, boom blocks within a puzzle. It's like, am I doing this right? If I just ram these like boulders with the wind through these walls enough, I eventually clear a path, I guess.
One thing that I've really liked that is similar to Breath of the Wild is I found some that I've kind of solved in the wrong way. Like there is that ability to kind of combine the things you can do in an unexpected way and get through it and in a way that they probably didn't intend, but they also didn't stop you from. And that's just really fun.
What really annoyed me though was getting into one of these, we'll just call them shrines, getting into one of these shrines environments and then having the message like, you do not have the god power to complete this puzzle. I was like, that sucks. That makes me appreciate Breath of the Wild so much more.
Yeah.
Just anything is fair game if you can figure it out. And so having that weird bit of gating, it's like, okay, I just got to bring it back down. I can't compare everything to Breath of the Wild. It's unreasonable. Here we go.
It is a little bit looser in that like I've straight up solved a puzzle that told me that without the thing then.
Oh, really?
But like that was because I was so upgraded with stamina that like I just was able to brute force a jump that I think I was meant to. Like at some point you unlock an ability that effectively acts as a triple jump, and then the game kind of treats it as that and says like, there are certain abilities that you can't, or certain puzzles that you can't solve without this like effective triple jump. But I was able to do it because I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this and then like sort of try to get on this platform or like stack these blocks in this particular way so that my jump is able to do that. So there is a little bit of fun circumventing there. But yeah, it does feel less kind of like organic, right? That the game just straight up can and cannot do in a way that, Breath of the Wild never did. But yeah, I think once I stopped kind of saying, okay, this is Ubisoft's version of Breath of the Wild. This is what that would look like. This is as close as you're going to get, right? Where everything is, you're never really lost because, anytime you get up to, like, the first thing you do in every region, right, is get up to the tallest building, basically scout the entire area. And you don't have to, but you can use this, like, true sight thing to basically map everything on the map immediately in a way that, like, you could sort of do in Breath of the Wild, but wasn't as explicit. It certainly didn't tell you exactly what the activity was.
It's very State of Decay in that way, yeah.
Yeah, so you're basically just, you're not really like exploring the world as much as you're like, okay, get on top of this thing, scout, like see all the things you can do, and then just go to all of those. And there's not going to be a ton of surprises along the way, but the things that you are going to are, like interesting to get to, right?
Yeah, and I'd say that's probably my biggest criticism at this point. And I've seen other people mention it. Sir, you mentioned your review that it doesn't have that sense of exploration that Zelda does, and that true sight ability really feels like the shining example of Ubisoft just not quite getting what made that so special about Breath of the Wild, because the point isn't to just like go up and like mark stuff on your map. Like what was cool about it in Breath of the Wild is that you were doing it organically. Like you would see something and you say, that looks like it might be something interesting. I'm just going to put a pin there and then I'm going to go check out and see what it actually is. And here you're just uncovering icons, and that's just like this slow, cumbersome process of like going around the entire panorama and being like, okay, it's somewhere here. It's somewhere here. Okay, that's, one of the ambrosia gems that you can get. And then, there's something here. You don't have that that agency as like, I'm going to go out and I'm actually going to explore this and find something interesting.
There was a little bit of even like some things that were like really telegraphed, like you'd see like a giant door with like a bunch of slopes leading up to it. Then you see a bunch of snowballs, right? And then you eventually figure out, oh, I have to grab the snowball and throw it down. But even like as you were looking around the map, there are things like, okay, there's some rocks here. Is this a thing that'll get me a Kokori seed if I complete this thing, or is it just nothing, right? Whereas here, that line is almost like everything is marked as clearly as possible. It's like, this is a vault because it's like giant thing coming out of the ground with a giant spire of light. This is a series of like giant hoops. So this is an Odysseus challenge, or like here's the giant plate that you do like a Hermes challenge on. Like all that stuff is explicit as possible. So you're not getting that. But I think that it doesn't necessarily want to be Breath of the Wild in that sense. It's just saying if you just want the easy mode, like just do the activities version of it, of like we're going to tell you where everything is, like effectively playing, Breath of the Wild with a guide, which I'm guessing a lot of people actually did. I would imagine that a lot of people, if they didn't look up specific ones, they're just going to be like, I don't care about figuring this out myself. I just want to see where everything is.
Yeah.
I think this is a game that more explicitly caters to that.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's interesting, Jacob Geller, with you talking about, with you talking about how we would talk so much about when are the Breath of the Wild clones coming. And it seems like we're kind of at that tipping point, I guess, this year with Genshin Impact being a big one. And then, I mean, to call it a clone is confusing, but the fact that this came out so close to Age of Calamity, it feels like the production cycles have now fully turned around, and now it's like, okay, we think the world's ready for these types of games. I'm curious about just like the timing of this game's release. I feel like this would be a lot better received if it came out in February. I think it's a tough one right now, but it's cool to have a shorter open world experience. But I'd imagine most fans of these games still haven't finished Valhalla,
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely absurd that Ubisoft released 3 massive open world games so close to one another.
Basically a month apart each,
Well,
right?
I do want to, this brings up something that I want to talk about here, which is that this is maybe not something that we talk about, from our perspective much. This is a kid's game, in a way that I really have not played many others this year. I think the dialogue is kind of cheesy and full of like innuendos, or they'll kind of like joke about, like stuff that they're not explicitly saying. But I would feel totally comfortable giving this game to like a 10-year-old cousin, in a way that I definitely would not with Assassin's Creed or with Cyberpunk or, any of these other big games that are coming out. And I think for a kid, this would be a great experience. Like all of the things we're complaining about, I think they would just be like, oh my God, look at all these chests that I can go find. Like it seems like a kid's game that I'm enjoying more so than a grown-up game that also children would like.
Don't think of it like as a Skylanders. I think, you're an adult, you can tackle it. But I mean, it makes sense where Ubisoft was coming. I'm sure the pitch is, let's take all the design lessons from Assassin's Creed and make something that the entire age range can enjoy. And it's like, oh, okay, you can stamp it out in a couple years. Here we go for it.
Yeah,
makes sense.
There are more, like there are enough jokes there about like those innuendo things that you mentioned that I'm kind of like, I'm not a parent, so I don't, I'm not gonna like make a judgment on this either way. But like it does feel like I would maybe sit on the couch and like be there with my kid when I played this, because there are straight up references to semen in this game. Like it is so
all right,
weird.
Sorry, this is a family-friendly podcast.
That's what I'm saying, is that like it is mostly like it mostly gets by, but there are enough things that come up over the course of the game that I'm just like, this did not have to be here. It feels like totally weird.
Yeah,
those would have gone right over my head as a dumb kid.
That's true. Like I think a lot of kids' entertainment from like the 90s and 80s specifically are like, let's sneak in a couple of adult jokes in there, and that maybe this is what that is going for. But like looking at it an adult, I'm just like, I don't know. Like, would a kid catch that? Because I don't know. Like, I don't know how smart kids these days are. I assume they're smarter than I was when I was a kid.
Yeah, we should have mentioned this a while ago, where it's like a Ubisoft open world where they consistently talk about semen. It's unnerving how often it comes up. No, but it's when you're dealing with the Greek myth, there's just a lot of like, oh boy, don't ask about this situation.
Yeah,
Whoa.
The Greek mythology, like they don't necessarily shy away from like, you know, a lot of the weird relationships in Greek mythology.
It all just treats it kind of like this inside joke, like the viewer, like, you remember this myth, right? From college, like just hoping that everybody, but you know, this team is so invested in it because they've been dealing with Greek mythology for so long in the Greek world because of Assassin's Creed, that there are a couple of these things where they're trying to be cheeky and jokey about things where it's like, I'm a mythology fan and I'm a little hazy on even what the joke is here.
Yeah, I will say though, as a whole, I think the tone of this game, and you totally nailed it, and it does feel like a kids movie, but I feel like it is more DreamWorks than Pixar in that a lot of it is very like, oh, let's make this like snarky joke about everything. Like, let's turn everything into like a setup punchline situation in a way that just, it gets really grating really quickly. And I think they miss on most of the jokes. I like, there are a couple of like pretty amusing gags that they pull off, but I think a lot of it is just like the commentary track between Prometheus and Zeus, which is like, they're basically the narrators of the game.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it feels unnecessary, even though it does give context to like, oh, this is the area where this happened or whatever. But like everything is just like, Zeus is going to make a joke. It's going to be bad. And Prometheus is just going to be like, oh, Zeus. And that is like the through line through so much of it. And that was like the thing that was consistently like, I would advise people, like, if you just want like the puzzles and stuff, you're more or less safe to skip the story. I don't think there's a lot there for you.
It's a podcast game. It's
Exactly.
a total podcast game.
I couldn't play it with podcasts because I was reviewing it, but I definitely thought multiple times like, man, it'd be nice to just pull up a podcast and forget all of this.
Yeah, I agree. The jokes are hit and miss. Tough for jokes to be all hits, but there every once in a while it's like there's just a weird rhythm to the cutscenes, even outside of the narration, even just interactions between like Phoenix and Hermes, where it's just like just hints every once in a while of a weird pacing. And I couldn't help but think about, I think we talked about it on the podcast before, but about just how this game was reworked. Because originally, back when they announced it was going to come out in February, it was supposed to be Homer, the writer, not the character, talking to his grandkids, and that was the narration running through the game. So we talk about like how Zeus and Prometheus are almost, you know, unnecessary as those commentators, or they feel disconnected. Probably because they was rewritten, and it's probably telling that they could gut that out and replace it with two other characters, and it's not going to break the game because it's just kind of this artificial layer on top.
Yeah, I could see this like during the Gods and Monsters era of them going a little bit more earnest, a little slightly more serious, but still keeping the same kind of art style. And then at some point someone said like, well, then that's just every other game we make. So why don't we go for something for a different vibe, right? And then at some point they just inserted all of this like personality into the game, and it ended up not like, for me, it just feels really strung in there. And the thing is that I think there are remnants of that kind of, if there is an original storyline or whatever, because towards the end of the game, they start pivoting to like more serious topics, and not like serious. I'm talking like DreamWorks movie serious, where it's like, okay, everybody slow down. We're going to try to impart a lesson here. And that stuff falls so flat because the entire time, all of these characters have been made to like be, you know, like the peanut gallery or like
breaking the fourth wall, and
where they're kind of just making fun of everything that's happening. Right. But then when they pivot, like, no, like, you know, if you think about, you know, Hephaestus's, you know, like whole arc, it's kind of tragic. And like when it starts pivoting to that, it just feels like you did not really, you didn't set this up well enough for me to care.
Yeah, it is certainly pretty chaotic out of the gate. And the game's director, Scott Phillips, was a designer back on the Saints Row series. Like, we interviewed him back at Game Informer for like the Saints Row 3 storyline. So I couldn't get that out of my head either. Just like, okay, some of that Saints Row comedy chaos coming through in the early sections. And, you know, I appreciate a game going for it, even 6 hours in, I was like, all right, I think I've had enough of this narration. I think we're good to go here.
To get back to something positive, I don't want to let this conversation end without saying, I think combat's really good.
Yeah.
That's something that I would say is a pretty net improvement over Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, for sure.
You get to combine lots of abilities in interesting ways. Their combos. My favorite like anecdote about it is, so this game has exactly the magnesis power from Breath of the Wild, like animated in the same way. Yeah. It does the same thing, but you can upgrade it to pull yourself towards an enemy like Devil May Cry. And like when you do that, it totally changes the feel of everything. And suddenly you're doing like aerial combos and like, you know, shooting all over the sky. And that's really neat. And that is not Zelda-esque at all. And I enjoyed that, you know, that change of pace a lot.
There's a lot of like techniques that are lifted from Breath of the Wild, like the flurry rushes, where if you dodge correctly, you get like a big slowdown effect. And yeah, like I really like the way combat scales, and like eventually you get the ability to do both of like you can pull an enemy to you and pull yourself to an enemy. So there was like a boss fight in a vault that I basically spent most of in the air, because the way combat works is that you spend stamina to get up in the air to like pull yourself to an enemy, but as you attack enemies, you gain stamina back. So you're kind of managing all these like kind of like 1 or 2 different meters to constantly stay up in the air. So it leads to some really cool like situations where you feel like you have a mastery of like all of your abilities, and there are certain enemies that are like, okay, these enemies are shielded, but you can parry their attacks. But you eventually get this ability that kind of summons spears out of the ground, and so like that counters shielded enemies. So like they have a pretty decent economy of like, okay, when I see this enemy, this is what I need to do.
Yeah, Jeffem, will you keep playing this game?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
For now.
Will you fight for this game to be on MinnMax's list of the 20 best games of the year, otherwise known as the 210s?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's and this kind of goes back to the story thing, which you guys were poo-pooing on, but like I'm not going to say that the writing's good or anything, but if we can take our critics' hats off for a second, like not every game has to completely blow my socks off with its amazing storytelling, and not every comedy is going to reach the upper echelon of amazing humor. And like having a different tone for this type of game, I really appreciate. Yes. Because so many of these open world games are so focused on being serious and trying to tell these serious stories that I don't mind the goofy narration, and there have been enough, like genuinely funny things that have happened that have surprised me that I'm enjoying it for that reason. And it is nice, also having Valhalla and also having Watch Dogs in those games on my backlist. This is a nice complement to those, where it's more focused and it's a different tone that makes me kind of want to keep jumping back in there. Yeah,
absolutely. I do think it will go down as one of the underrated AAA games of 2020, because I'm fascinated to learn that Ubisoft is reaching out to a lot of YouTubers. They're definitely generous with giving us codes as well. I think they just want to get into the hands of people because it's a solid game, and from what I can see, there is very little hype out there for this game. Like, all of our coverage, even like Game Informer's coverage, it's like, God, this game's better than it's deserving right now. So I think there's going to be a fan base for this game for quite a while.
It does also look a lot like a very pretty mobile game. Like all of the like HUD elements and stuff, it just kind of looks like a fake game. Those like fake phone game ads that you see, and it's like, I think it looks really pretty, but like it's not really striking, especially if you just kind of like see it scrolling past you.
While I was reviewing it, I think that my brother and I had a quick conversation about like this just looks like Fortnite, doesn't it? Like, doesn't it? Isn't this just kind of like Fortnite? And I think I find a lot of the characters' eyes kind of weird, like in that they're like huge, but like it does feel like it is. I can't say it's not like a decent, like I don't hate the art style. It just feels like it's in this weird midzone where it's like, it's not bland, but it's not like super distinct either.
There's moments that look really great. I think some of the animations are a little bit stiffer than I would like, both in cutscenes and for character movement. Yeah. But I still think it looks pretty good. I'm playing on Series X, and it was the first time that I ran into this situation in this generation where there are loading screen tips, but because it loads so fast, you don't get a chance to read them. So it's like, oh, wait a second, what does that actually say? But I assume most people playing won't have that issue because they won't be playing on the new gen consoles, I would imagine. It's a telling sign to me, though. We got codes for the Switch version, and I immediately went to Kyle, because like, hey, Kyle, it's your type of game. You want to play it on Switch? And he's like, I actually don't want to play it on Switch. Like, he hit his limit of like, I don't trust how this game's going to run. And it turns out it's a little bit chuggy. I've heard that it crashes a couple of times.
And also it looks like Silent Hill. Like the fog is like in day.
Oh, really? I haven't seen footage of it.
I think I saw a headline. I think it was Kotaku that said the Switch version of Immortals tries real hard.
Yeah, it's cool that they got it on the system, but hopefully it's not too rough of an experience for folks out there. Also, I'm super excited for the DLC, because it seems like they're kind of taking the Far Cry approach, where The second DLC pack is called Myth of the Eastern Realm, and it feels like it's going to be hopefully standalone, but it's going to be like a new protagonist, and it's going to be all about Chinese mythology. So I hope it's just kind of like that Far Cry 5 DLC mentality of just having like this smaller open world, because I will absolutely play through that. I'm really looking forward to that. I don't know if I'll finish this main game, but having a smaller version, the new mythology, happy to check that out. Basically, just keep making your open world smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually I'll really tackle one of them. But there we go. You can check out Serial's review on GameSpot.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I liked it, so.
Yeah. Oh, great. I did too. I like it as much as I like Jeffem. As much as I like Jeffem leaving.
What would you give Jeffem?
I
7 out of 10.
give him 5 seconds to get on out of here, buddy.
All right.
Ana Diaz.
Hey.
Welcome. Honor to have you. And Leo Vader.
Hello.
Leo, if I could be honest with you, I kind of feigned like surprise in my voice, but I figured you'd be coming on this podcast.
And we were talking for like 3 minutes before you started.
No, I don't know
I
what
think,
you're talking
I think
about
it was
there.
after the 10th minute that Leo was on the call that I figured, I think he might be on this show.
I don't know what you're talking about. That's only for folks at the Backstage Pass tier. We are here to talk about some underappreciated games from 2020, or as the community likes to call them, hidden gems from 2020. We each have 3 roughly games that we think deserve some more attention, because if I know one thing, it's that everybody watching or listening to this is just dying for another game to play. They're saying, where can I get my hands on some games right now? And we say this podcast, damn it. So we each have, roughly 3. We can go around the horn and kind of share our top 3 most underappreciated games of 2020. Jacob Geller, what is your number 3?
Number 3. So this was a game that I talked about a little earlier this year on a video. It's called Tales from Off-Peak City. There's this indie developer named Cosmo D, who's made a couple games in the past, who just has this really weird, fascinating style where everything is kind of intentionally like clashing with each other. You know, it feels like one of those games where it's just like assets pulled from all over the place, and they're all kind of stuffed into this one box. And then he does his own soundtracks, and there's this like really funky, cool jazz. And so the whole game kind of feels like improvisational jazz, where it's like things shouldn't necessarily go together, but they do. Tales from Off-Peak City is kind of just a walking simulator. You're like a pizza delivery guy, and you bring pizzas to different people. And there's not that much kind of like story-wise that happens in it, but it's just kind of getting the vibe of the city.
Yeah.
I find it really interesting, and it's funny, and there are some kind of like sinister undertones that maybe it's called, I think it's like volume 1 or episode 1, so he might be making more of these things, but even as a standalone, it's like an hour and a half maybe, and I really enjoyed it.
Interesting. There we go. And what's that on?
It is on PC generally. I think it was a humble original for a while, but now you can get it on Steam.
Okay, nice. And if you missed the names of these games, that was Tales from Off-Peak City, but all the names will be in the description below for your easy, convenient reference, because we love you. Serial, what's one of your most underrated games this year?
Yeah, I feel like maybe the spirit of this category is kind of indie, but I'm going to actually give a quick shout out to Black Mesa, which is the remake of the original Half-Life, which came out a lot. Like, we talked about it on the show. I think Kyle mentioned it, but I think as I get into my end of the year stuff, I'm very much contemplating where this is going to land on my top 10, not if it's going to be on there, because I think it does. There have been kind of a lot of debates about, what a remake should be, especially since we've had some pretty like notable remakes this year.
Yeah.
But I think Black Mesa is sort of where I would want a remake to be, like ideally in terms of being like the de facto version of a game to play, and that it does update a lot of the assets. And I know there are people who are going to miss kind of like visual weirdness in the original Half-Life, that it's just like, oh, this texture's kind of muddy, so I don't know what it is. Whereas this clarifies that. But this feels like it is preserving the things that made Half-Life good, and it even improves them, like because they went back and extended a lot of the Zen sections, which some people have mixed thoughts about. Some people don't like them as much.
Yeah, is that what people wanted from the original Half-Life, was more Zen?
Yeah, I think people just wanted Zen to either go away or be good. And I think they kind of went with like, we're going to invest a little bit more and actually try to make it a significant portion. Because you going to Zen, I think, is a significant part of that story.
Right.
But here they kind of extended. I'm a fan overall. I don't think it's like perfect, but I think they do a pretty good job of modernizing those sections. But even just the sections before that, I think actually are really strong, and they kind of show to highlight like the original design of this game was actually like super good. Like even beyond it's just like you follow this thing and there's a series of story events that happen and it doesn't feel guided like the way a lot of shooters were. I think that stuff is still really strong now, and I think this game does a really good job of highlighting that without making it feel aged.
Yeah, that's a great call. Black Mesa. Ana Diaz.
Mine are in no particular order.
Perfect.
I just want to specify that. I also want to say, like, I don't know, for underrated, I just went with games that I felt like should have been talked about more.
Yeah.
But for this title, like, actually in the past week, I've been seeing a ton of people pick it up. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if it still falls into this category in a very clear way. But I've been playing Umurangi Generation.
That absolutely qualifies.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Ever since the DLC came out. And I mean, what I'm going to say, basically, like, this game is like no other video game that I played this year really like nails the current like moment and feeling better than Umurangi. Umurangi, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly.
It's New Zealand?
Yeah, New Zealand, Australia based.
Okay.
And so actually the game designer drew inspiration from the fires for like some of the environment design. So it's like very kind of apocalyptic, it's realistically apocalyptic and like weirdly relaxing.
We talked about it on the podcast a while ago. You probably forgot about it because it's called Umurangi Generation. Really a rough name to try and memorize. But yeah, it's indie Pokemon Snap.
Yeah. No rails, Pokemon Snap, and just like really fitting to the current moment.
Yeah.
Can I ask? So I have this game, and it's a game that I really want to like. And I played like the first level and a half and found the actual just like, it was like, I like the art style and stuff, but it was just kind of like take pictures of stuff until the level ends, kind of until you found everything. Does it, like, should I keep playing? Like, does it get kind of more interesting, or will I get more into the vibe of it?
I mean, as you progress, like, you do have the ability to shoot like more populated areas, like the areas become more sort of like complex and bigger. But I'd say like if those original, the first sort of zone wasn't super like it wasn't necessarily like the most interesting thing to me, like right off the bat, I'd say. But it does like, it did sort of pull me in more as I played more. But I will say, like, I was kind of already interested in like the environment from the second stage. So like maybe it won't, if the interest isn't there, I can't like do a hard recommend.
Like I really want to like it. Everyone who I like in the games industry seems to love this game.
Yes.
And so it's, it's on my list for that reason.
I'm totally with you, Jacob. Yeah, where I started up a couple days ago and I was like, I want to like this game. It made me nauseous or nauseated, I guess technically I should say, which was surprising to me because it's first person, It seems like a slow FPS in terms of mechanics here, except you have a camera. But for some reason, I think just the visuals hit me too hard. But it's funky. But why do you think it's landing so well with people this year? Why are people gaga over this thing?
I mean, I think that it's sort of like it's not just like a photography game. It's also, has something to say about like the act of photographing things and like being a photographer. And so there's like sort of like a commentary nestled into it. Like I think so many times like certain games will have certain themes in it, but like not have a strong message like on said theme. And so I think that Umurangi is like much better at sort of like delivering like general, I guess, like social commentary in that sense on like that activity. So like this whole act of like photographing people like under crisis, under these apocalyptic conditions, etc. As you progress, you sort of there's more to that. But I also think that it's just hitting with people because it is like politically relevant. And it is socially relevant, and you definitely get more of that like the further you get into it. So like you see like all the people wearing masks and, you see like more like a police presence in certain areas. And you have this weird, you play this weird role of being able to just be like almost like an outsider who's unaffected by the apocalypse.
Right. And is it PC only? Oh, it's on Switch too? Oh.
Yeah, it's on Switch or it's coming to Switch at some point.
Okay.
Soon.
Yes. Coming to Switch later. Okay, but yeah, it looks like PC only right now. But cool. Umurangi Generation. Leo. Wow us, dude.
Get ready.
Okay.
I've got the cheat code here which is you just say a VR game, and they're all going to be underappreciated. Walking Dead Saints and Sinners released in January this year.
Yeah.
And I adore it.
Really?
I think what it does so special is the physicality of the combat. It's like it's a Walking Dead zombie survival game. You know what to expect. You're scavenging for resources, which is more fun in VR, actually pulling open the drawers and grabbing items and looking at like what parts they contain, the stapler with the metal in it, putting it in your backpack or whatever. But the combat is so physical and brutal in a way that VR has trouble with sometimes. Slicing with a sword can feel not very tactile, but in Walking Dead, your bladed weapons will just like stick into enemies and you'll have to do the force of yanking them back out.
I'm
not
amazed.
to mention like cutting limbs off and everything. It's really brutal, but in a way that's systemic and fun to goof around with.
The idea
Slice
of
someone's head off and throw it over a house or whatever.
It would seem like you would be fed up with Walking Dead games, licensed games. Like it's telling that this won you over in VR.
Yeah, it's the first Walking Dead thing I've cared about in a long time for sure.
Yeah.
But it really nails the VR combat. Like Boneworks obviously is another tentpole VR physical combat game, but this, I think the game aspect is more fun. The scavenging, the dealing with factions. There are people that want certain things. There are people that will, act like they want certain things and then ambush you. You know how it happens in video games. But I just adore it. I love just throwing guns around, juggling them, and shooting people. It really nails the feel of it in a way that makes me want to come back again and again, which not a lot of VR games do.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Here's a quick one from me that I talked about just recently on the show. But Pumpkin Jack, everybody, if you're not sick of 3D platformers, freaking love some Pumpkin Jack. It's out on absolutely everything known to man. It's just a short 4 to 5 hour simple platformer. But you know what? It does the body good. Jacob Keller, number 2.
Okay, my number 2. This is another one where it's like maybe I don't know how popular this is or not, but I really love Carrion. The reverse horror game that came out this year. It's one of my favorite games of the year. It's so, I listened to your whole thing, thing Deepest Dive.
Yes.
Your whole thing. And what I really like about Carrion is it makes you act the way that monsters in movies act for kind of logical reasons. Like there are things where like it doesn't really tell you when someone dies in the game. Like you're killing guys, but it's not like, all right, you got to move on to the next one. And so the only way to be really sure that someone's dead is to completely eviscerate them in this really kind of gross way. But like for you, the monster, you don't have any indication that they're dead until they're like, halfway across the screen. And so, you watch the thing and you're like, why is it just going insane on these guys? But then you play as it and you're like, I don't know, maybe it makes sense.
The thing was scared all along, you guys. It had to create that thing with multiple heads.
It also, it has some stunning animation work, both in just how you move around, which is instantly kind of identifiable as interesting, but also just in like, I don't know, you unlock some abilities later on that are kind of normal video game abilities, but I have not seen them animated like this before. And it's just really, really neat.
Yeah, that's a good pick. Carrion, it's available on damn near everything, I think. Devolver put it out.
Yeah, it's on Game Pass.
Oh, there we go. Just Game Pass, that works. Surreal?
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to Treachery and Beatdown City, which is kind of a sort of mix between an RPG and a beat 'em up in a weird way that I actually found really cool. I wasn't able to finish it mostly because I hit like a weird bug that I had to figure out how to work around, and I ended up not going back to it. But like the I think 2 or 3 hours that I played of it, I really enjoyed. Because it is just it is not a complex game in that you are just basically going from encounter to encounter, like literally in like a Super Mario Brothers 3-esque like map where you're just kind of, okay, here's the next level, here's the next level, here's the next level, and every level is basically like 1 or 2 encounters. But it's pretty good about giving like you only play as one of 3 characters at a time, but it's really good about making this a turn-based RPG that actually has a lot of depth just in one character of like, okay, you need to use these attacks to set up this other attack, and then this is how you kind of exploit the enemy's weakness.
Wait, so it's not a brawler, it's a turn-based RPG?
It's sort of a combination of both, because as you're kind of wandering, like you're basically wandering, like if you imagine like one screen of a beat 'em up, you're kind of just walking around it, and you have the stamina, like basically your mana, that you're kind of waiting to build up. And while you're doing that, you can actually just punch enemies regularly. But like you get your real damage from like pausing the action, selecting I'm going to do a 3-hit combo that kind of makes them susceptible to throws. And so like and they're weak to throws, which is that, but they're not super, like punches aren't effective, but this one combo sets the other thing up.
Yeah, I feel like this game,
my most underrated game, Final Fantasy VII Remake.
That's right, the perfect game. Everybody's number 1, I presume, so we can skip that.
Yeah, so you're like setting up these different characters, and like there are different character types that you kind of want to go in with different characters for, like one of the 3 characters against. And like the storyline is interesting in that it kind of, it's not like super deep or anything, but it does deconstruct a lot of like, especially let's say like Bay Area kind of stereotypes about people who like are gentrifying a neighborhood, like tech billionaires kind of thing. So it's always fun to have these like dialogue exchanges.
I feel like this game got lost in the shuffle because I feel like there have been 7 notable throwback brawler looking things in the last couple of years, and in my mind this is just lumped in with every other one of those. Like I think they're all roughly the same.
Yeah, but I think it is kind of this weird message of like, no, it's a beat 'em up, but it's also an RPG, so it's kind of like hard to sell. But sure. I would say it's definitely like approach it as an RPG with like a beat 'em up look.
There we go.
And I appreciated that.
Anna, number 2, very specifically your number 2.
Yeah, my number 2, most overrated. You guys might like smash my head into a wall for saying this. I think that Persona 5 Royal was underrated.
Sorry, we got to let you go on it. It's been nice talking to you. Thanks for being
breaking
here.
up the video and audio
and our interest.
I think that Persona 5 overshadowed it. People viewed it too much as like a tiny iteration, when in fact, the more I read about it, it's like it proved it, and the more I play of it, it added so much to the game and like fixed pretty big problems with Persona 5, and that like it would probably be one of the most, beloved entries of the series,
right,
if it wasn't framed as, the extension of Persona 5.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, the bad news is that Persona 5 is impossible to finish and see credits roll for because it's too big, and the fact that this adds more on.
Persona 5 Royal is it's Infinity plus 20 hours.
That's exactly. They should have just called it that.
That's what it says on how long to beat. It just says never. But like, yeah, that is a game that all year I've been meaning to play it since it came out in March, and it's just like
you just pick it up. It's short enough. It's very short game.
Yeah, but the task. It's a pretty big ask to tell someone who, like me, who went and beat a 120-hour game to do it again, and this time it'll be longer.
Yeah.
But it's like no amount of telling them seriously, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Which is all I've heard. It's still like a pretty big ask when there's like, entirely new experiences to play. And so I totally get that frustration of like, there's enough new here to kind of qualify its own entry in like Game of the Year lists and stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a big ask.
And that's the thing is I totally don't blame anyone for not playing it, especially if you played Persona 5. Like it would be a completely asinine thing to do, in my opinion, but it is underrated for these reasons, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. Tame Kitty in the chat, watching us live with Backstage Pass here, mentions like, the fact that it's another $60, which I get, but then coupled with the fact that Persona 5 Standard is available in the PlayStation 5 PS Plus collection thingy. It's like there's just so many factors dragging down Persona 5 Royale. But I hear you that there are a lot of fans out there screaming about this game that it deserves more love this year. So thank you for representing them, Anna.
Yeah.
And now I'll be deleting these YouTube comments. No. Leo, number 2.
Number 2 is Rogue Company.
Interesting.
This is you've either seen it or you've seen 100 games exactly like it. It's a
I'm listening.
free-to-play hero shooter, third person. I don't know why I tried it in the first place, because I had a friend who was excited about it, I guess, and I got a free code off a stream, but it's a completely solid, fun shooter. It's, again, third person, hero-based abilities. There's, one where you can detect people going through a certain area. There's snipers, there's shooters. The shooting basically feels really good, peeking around corners in third person and whatnot, using your grenades at the right time.
And this is from the Realm Royale team, is that right?
Right.
Okay. And then they also had that other, probably more popular game. What was it? This is High Res. Did they make Smite? Yeah, okay. Smite and Paladins and all that stuff.
Right. Yes, that team, which I've always bounced immediately off of their games. But I don't know. It's fun to boot up and to warm up for other shooters in. It's easily
on
worth
a hardcore scale from I don't know what the least hard, but if it was Overwatch on one side and Siege on the other, where's time to kill in here?
I would put it definitely on the Overwatch side of things, if not past the Overwatch side of things. It is really easy to get into, for sure.
Yeah, kind of in that same vein. I assume no one's going to pick it as their number 1, so I'll drop it here. But did anybody else play Rocket Arena, which is now available on PS Plus? It's kind of like a shooter that combines elements of Smash, where you're trying to blow people out of the arena. I only played a couple rounds of it, but it kind of reminds me of Rogue Company that way. I'm just this is a surprisingly solid game that probably deserves better. So hopefully it finds that audience on PS Plus.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
There's not much to say about it.
Yeah, that's
sorry.
But Rogue Company, it's on Switch and everything, right?
Everything, yeah. On PC, it's on Epic Games Store. If you haven't seen it, that's why.
Oh, hey, here's a thinker for you, Leo, just to drag you down, just to the pits of hell. Seth in the Backstage Pass says, Rogue Company also had that weird crossover with Dr. Disrespect. He designed a map for them after launch.
That's right.
Weirdly, the map is all bathroom stalls.
Yeah, it's weird. Specific.
Let's say you can stream here.
The ultimate skin for a character that's Dr. Disrespect, and you can do his signature dance.
Which everybody knows.
Signature dance?
Can someone demo it? I've never seen it.
Well,
so
Leo's the only one who has. So
I'm just very
Hold on.
ignorant.
Let me rhythmically cheat on my wife.
Jesus Christ. Hey, anyways, Jacob Geller, number 1, is that where we're at? Oh, no, it's on me? Is that where we're at?
It's on you.
Okay, this sounds very, very biased, I suppose, but I'm trying to be as objective as I can here, talking about games that I think are underrated. But a friend of the show, Charles McGregor, released a game called HyperDot back in January that I really had a great time with and I think deserves some more attention. And it's available on Game Pass and also through Prime Gaming now. I think he incorporated some Twitch interaction. But if you like Geometry Wars, if you like arcadey games, a little bit of Robotron in there, just very Twitch heavy, reflex heavy, great podcast arcadey games, HyperDot. Check it out. Leave it a review on Steam. I know we were plugging it earlier this year on the podcast, so qualifiers. But I still really enjoyed my time with HyperDot this year. Jacob Geller, number 1.
All right. Leo, you thought you had the cheat codes earlier. I've got stronger ones because my most underrated game is called Mýrdalssandur, Iceland.
Come on. Shut
That is
just Steam sort by recent. That's smart.
no, it's for real. So there's this guy who makes just these. You know what? Sometimes you'll see, if you look at the Dreams subreddit, sometimes there's an unbelievably well realized environment, and that's kind of all it is. It's look at this, I made this, beautiful field of wheat or whatever. That's kind of what this is with Unreal 4, where this guy is just making kind of unbelievably pretty environments. And this one specifically, Mýrdalssandur, Iceland, it looks basically exactly like Death Stranding, because Death Stranding looks like Iceland. And all you do there is you have a camera and you have kind of a number of certain angles of things that you're supposed to take pictures of. It's very, very light gameplay, but mostly it's just this like stunningly beautiful environment that you can walk around. And it's in first person. It's very immersive. It actually has a VR component if you want. But I just found it very, very meditative. And on this year, where I haven't left my house in like 9 months, I really appreciated just kind of like this chunk of digital tourism.
Yeah, it kind of scratches that same itch as the Assassin's Creed Discovery Tour thing that I think was also released this year as well. Or like a nice
sure, but
vacation.
I would never describe that as meditative. You know, that's like someone like, and in the olden times they used copper, and this is like, you know.
There are two kinds of vacationers: ones that actually relax, and then the others that like fill up their time with activity.
Right, you could choose your path, but yeah, Jacob and I are on different paths. I like a good tour guide at all my vacations.
Yeah, and so this is, you know, I chose my favorite one, but he actually has several of these with like different locales, and it's like, it really just feels like kind of being in a different place. You know, however he's kind of combining these assets or whatever, just feel like you are somewhere, and that's cool. I really, really liked it.
Yeah, good call. Suriel Vasquez, sir, you're number one.
Yeah. I'm just going to talk about Ifound, which is a very good adventure game. That is, I think, in terms of like quality per hour, is maybe like the highest ratio of a game I've played this year.
Yeah.
It is 2 hours long. It is a really, really good 2 hours. And it is a story that you don't see a lot in games, where it is not, there's like some sci-fi elements, but it is mostly about this teenage girl who's going to this like weird stage in her life where I think she moves back in from college, and kind of her parents kind of are kind of uncomfortable because I think part of it is like she is a trans character, and so like a lot of it is her parents coming to terms with that, and like kind of her coming back to Ireland, which is a weird, like, this is a Irish game in a lot of ways, in that it tells you a lot about local Irish landmarks and things that like it has like a sort of Hades-esque kind of thing where you can highlight certain things and it'll define them for you, and a lot of them are kind of like Irish I don't know how to pronounce this word, like neologism. So where it's just like here's some local flavor like language from Ireland that we're going to define for you, but like the big kind of mechanic is, and it's effectively a visual novel. The way you advance it, though, is that you kind of scrub the screen on your PC and kind of like hover your mouse over it and kind of fill it out.
Yeah.
And at first, like, I thought like, oh, this is neat. And then maybe like 20 minutes into it, it's like, oh, this is not so neat, because it's like it is like an overly long button press. But they do some interesting stuff with it, where as you're advancing and kind of scribbling all over the screen to kind of like erase the last frame and draw in the new one, you kind of have to do it multiple times, and it layers on different story elements each time.
Yeah.
And those thematically tie into the storytelling.
Yeah, I started it. Annapurna published it, so it's got a certain quality bar there. I think the music is great. And yeah, I'm totally with you. Where it started out, I'm like, visually, how much can they really shake this up? But having so many different styles and stuff as you're using your mouse to erase the screen and reveal the new style underneath over and over and over again. It's a nice way to vary up what is, a graphic novel in a lot of ways. Or not
and
graphic
like
novel,
the story, like there's like a sci-fi conceit, so it's not like 100%,
right,
quote, realistic, but it is a very down to earth story, like the kind that I think you can't really find in the AAA space, because at some point you have to throw in like some, mechanic in there at some point. But I think it is like a really strong story, like regardless of medium, and I think more people should definitely play it.
Yeah.
Sure.
If Found was that one. Anna, number one with a bullet.
Yeah. Again, skirting that, like, I wouldn't say this is like an underappreciated game.
Just sell it.
But Act 5 of Kentucky Route Zero.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Jacob Geller is hooting and hollering like the crowd from Arsenio Hall.
Silently.
Yeah, I just thought that this was a stunning game, a stunning ending to a really like captivating and compelling game. And I think that it sort of maintains what the rest like of the game has done really well. But it still manages to like introduce intriguing imagery and give us like a compelling ending. And I just think that it's a really beautiful world sort of that they build and space to be in. And like, I was thinking about it, and actually I tweeted this morning and Jacob Geller responded, who might be on this podcast right now, about like Outer Wilds and how that gave me just like, I don't know, listening to the soundtrack, I was like, wow, I really miss this game. And I was sort of like, did any games really impact me in this way this year? I was going over the list and I was like, I think Kentucky Road Zero.
Interesting. Same ballpark.
I will say though, like I wasn't necessarily like I didn't even consider it for my underappreciated just because I appreciate it so much. So I guess, but because it like I was scrolling down my list of games that I played and I was like, oh yeah, Kentucky Road Zero is the game of the year. But like, okay, let's see what else I have on here. But you're right in that like even in kind of like as the swell for like game of the year stuff pops up, I haven't been hearing enough people talking about Kentucky Route Zero.
It just came out so long ago.
A bummer. Yeah, it came out in like January. So yeah, everyone forgot
and
about
also in 2010. Right?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, like just the fifth act, and it came out on Switch and like consoles effectively.
Yeah,
this year.
So it is out now on everything. But yes, I hear you. Serial, you must be so happy that you have another cohort that's going to be fighting for Kentucky Road Zero for the 210s.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I think that the fifth act is especially like interestingly structured because I feel like it is funky. Both. It completely ties into the narrative themes of that game, but also does a thing that like not a lot of games with that kind of specific mystique do.
Right.
Which is to just pivot in a way that I think fits the themes of that story well in a way that you don't expect of like, oh, this isn't necessarily what I wanted, but they're kind of right about the way they approach that ending.
Sure. Leo Vader. Number 1, sir.
Number 1.
Here it comes.
Another VR title.
Perfect.
Called Until You Fall. This has become my new VR game that tricks me into working out, like Pistol Whip was last winter. It's a sword fighting game. It's a VR roguelike. So I appreciate that about it already. Like Walking Dead, it's a reason to get back in your VR headset a few times a week versus even like Half-Life Alyx, which is amazing, but you do it in like 4 sessions and you're done. But I think VR benefits from having more games like this where you just want to keep coming back. But the roguelike aspects of it, it doesn't really change that much. It's just shuffling up enemies. But the combat is so dense and varied, and there's so many different builds you can bring to it that it's really exciting. And the skill ceiling, like the learning curve, you feel like you're getting better and better. Basically what you're doing moment to moment is blocking enemies most of the time. They'll be hitting you with a flurry of swings, and you'll have lines that are vertical, diagonal, horizontal, and you'll have to line up your blade to block them at the right time in the rhythm and in the order that they pop up. So you kind of get a feel for the sword fighting and where you can, between blocks, like get a hit in with your other hand so you can break their guard and bring enemies down that way. But it's a really satisfying combat system with a lot of different weapons that all handle super differently. Like you can just get a fist gauntlet that you can't even block with, but it gives you extra health and you can punch with it and dash more. It's really fun VR combat. And again, it just tricks me into working out by having me not only block, but like dodge downwards, just do a quick squat every once in a while or dodge to the side. I will like work up a sweat without even thinking about it, more so than like Ring Fit Adventure where it's like, okay, I'm here to work out. It's like, I want to play this fun game and it's going to exhaust me.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It's from...
Can I ask?
Oh, please.
Can I ask an absurd question? Do you feel like you're any better at sword fighting in the real world because of this? Because sometimes with VR, that does feel like the case.
I have thought about it, and I really want to believe I would be.
Guaranteed. Hey,
I would be better at keeping track of all that different stuff going on. Yeah.
You can set a Better Quest goal for yourself once COVID's over about getting really into fencing.
Challenge someone to a duel.
Yeah, or just jump right to that level. You're right. That's much more entertaining.
I want to kill someone this month.
Great.
For the Christmas special.
But yeah, this is from Shell Games, who Jesse Shell, the founder of that studio in like Pittsburgh, I think. He was the college teacher of Neil Druckmann from Naughty Dog fame. But they've been making VR games for a while, like Expect You to Die, stuff like that. And so it's cool that they finally hit one that seems like people are really latching onto here with Until You Fall. Although I just looked on their gamography, and they also released in August of this year, Leo, a game called History Maker VR. Oh. Listening, perform as a U.S. historical character in an immersive virtual reality environment. Create your scene, pick your props, read your script, and export your performance in this VR content creation tool. So if you need something for Great Goaty Hunt next week, you could perform as Pocahontas according to the little screenshot here.
I'm wish listing it.
Hello. My number one is a game called Littlewood. Came out in the summer on Steam. It is eventually coming to Switch. I think it's going to have a huge boom once it finally hits Switch, because this is a very Animal Crossing, Stardew Valley inspired experience. If you like farming, especially if you like customization in those games, Dark Cloud-esque of just tweaking every aspect in your town, arranging all the houses, customizing the inside of the houses, changing the terrain, changing everything. Littlewood is the game for you. It's a wonderful, relaxing game that, yes, has farming in it, also mining, exploring. There's also a lot of dating in there as well, if you're into that sort of thing. I think the internet in 2020 is into that sort of thing. It's just a lovely experience, and it fixes or gets right, I think, a lot of things that Animal Crossing still manages to get wrong, of just simple quality of life things about just, if you go up to an object, it'll automatically take out the tool that you need and just take care of that. It seems like going right from Animal Crossing to Littlewood is like, oh my God, okay, here's a designer who knows exactly how to please a gamer.
I also agree that Animal Crossing doesn't have enough dating, Hanson.
Right. Okay, good. We're on the same page then. But yeah, Littlewood from developer Sean Young. So hopefully it'll hit Switch soon and get a second win, but it's $15 on Steam if you want to check it out there. Jacob Geller, you said you wanted to throw in some additional ones.
Yeah, just some honorable mentions.
Please.
I'm surprised that you did not mention UnderMine.
Yeah, I do like that game a lot. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I think it probably did pretty well. I played 27 hours of that game. Like, I beat it.
Nice. Yeah, the time really sucks away. I think, strangely enough, Hades kind of deflated my love for UnderMine a little bit. Where
I went back to it after Hades, still had a pretty good time. So it's not impossible to return to it. Manifold Garden, I recently made a video about, but is this kind of like infinite puzzle game where like the worlds just repeat, so you can like fall forever and you're like falling past the same things over and over. Let's see. I really like Streets of Rage 4, another kind of beat 'em up, which probably was not that underrated, but just the number of times I've listened to the soundtrack, like I feel like I should put it on.
I wouldn't necessarily go to bat for Streets of Rage 4, but I would go to bat for Streets of Rage 4's soundtrack.
Yeah, that's about it. That's pretty much what I got.
No, that's great. I have some other ones that I could throw in there real quick. Among Trees, still in early access, but Anna, I think you joined me for that Great Goaty Hunt. That's a cool survival game in the woods. It looks fantastic. So it's one that even if it's not ready yet in early access, eventually I think that thing will be very cool once it's a fully fleshed out experience. But kind of in that same way, I think you're talking about exploring Iceland, Jacob. I think just having a game where you can go chill in the woods, slowly build up a cabin, try not to get eaten by a bear, certain thrill to going on some sort of adventure here in 2020. And then also Bug Fables and CrossCode on Switch this year. They came out last year, or maybe even 2018 on Steam. But both little RPGs are on Switch, and Bug Fables is very, very Paper Mario inspired. So if you missed the early 2 entries of Paper Mario, check out Bug Fables. And then CrossCode is kind of like a 2D dot hack meets Legend of Zelda. But it's do you know it, Surreal?
I played it when it came out on Steam, and it was definitely one of those games that just has, for me, felt it had like way too many systems out of the gate, where it feels like you're playing this pretend MMO, right? So it has all those kind of trappings, but that was definitely just a game that I didn't necessarily fall off of. I just kind of stopped playing and didn't come back to. But what I played of it seemed pretty interesting for sure.
Yeah.
But like on your Paper Mario note, I think I do want to give another quick shout out to the Origami King, which also came out this year, which I feel like it's weird to say that a Nintendo game was underappreciated, because this game I think did sell pretty well. Mm-hmm. But I think that a lot of people were, like rightfully kind of turned off to the last couple of Paper Mario games. But I think this game, I think the combat system is one of probably the most interesting RPG combat system I've played this year.
It's weird
in how creative it is, and how different it is. It does get a little bit repetitive, but I think a lot of if you think about it, I think a lot of RPGs combat ends up getting pretty repetitive once you figure out the systems. Because you end up I have these kind of like similarly leveled characters. I'm just gonna mash A until the fight's over in a lot of cases. Whereas this, you at least have to do that extra layer of lining up the enemies appropriately, and like it's just like maybe like probably one of my favorite written games of the year for sure in terms of how consistently good the jokes are.
Yeah, Leo, have you checked out a game called Noita? Have you seen this on Steam?
I haven't. I've seen it, but I haven't played it. Okay,
it's from the creator of Baba Is You, I'm pretty sure. I think he was working on this in early access and then went to Baba Is You and then went back to finish it off and released it this year. It seems like a sloppier, more chaotic Spelunky, but people love it. It's $20 on Steam right now, and the hook here is that every pixel is simulated. So it's a lot of fire effects, poison effects, acid effects as it's eating away the world. But it seems up your alley. Might be a good Great Goaty Hunt contender at some point here.
But I think it was on a Great Goaty Hunt poll and it didn't get picked, and so now I can never play it.
Oh, it's worth putting in another poll where it's just the only entry, though, I think.
Okay,
I think it's going to be the way to go, yeah.
I have an honorable mention.
Oh, yeah, please.
Gears Tactics.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like was underappreciated. I think if you don't like Gears of War, and even if you don't really like tactics games, you might like it. It feels like just an action game you happen to control like a tactics game. Playing Empire of Sin this week on the Great Goaty Hunt, it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of the tactics I'm used to, the really chunky movement and the kind of hilariously bad animations on your kills and whatnot. Yeah. But Gears Tactics is just unbelievably smooth, and it really has I don't know, it almost makes other tactics games look bad sometimes by how well everything flows together and how smooth it feels to play.
Yeah, it's weird to think that like Microsoft of all people produced poured this much money into a tactics game of all things in an age where like even XCOM wasn't putting as much money into XCOM as they're used to.
Right.
But yeah, I like what I played of it. I think I definitely found really strong in terms of like it feels like a more arcadey, faster kind of like it almost feels like to XCOM what Immortals is to Zelda, where it's just like if you don't actually want like the difficult kind of thing that pushes back on you, here's kind of a more like a faster take where you feel a little bit more empowered over the course of every turn, but like you still kind of get that tension.
Yeah.
We have a bunch of community suggestions. Leo, do you want to help me run through these?
Yeah.
Amanzo7 wrote in saying, I feel that Ori 2 is still an extremely underappreciated game, with it being in the top 2 for my personal game of the year. And then Wes Bates also wrote in talking about Ori, but like, why aren't people talking more about Ori this year? It's driving me insane. There's definitely that groundswell out there that's ready to fight to the death.
Hey, it's on my regular favorite games. I just felt like people liked it enough that it wasn't underrated.
I feel like it is appropriately. Like everyone who talks about the game says it's pretty good.
Yeah. Leo?
Hunter S. Sachs says, for me, one of the most underappreciated games this year was Spiritfarer, of course. It lands in my personal top 5 so far. A charming blend of base building, upgrades, and open world to explore, borderline Metroid-like style of progression, and to top it off on one of the most touching stories of the year. And special shout out to Manifold Garden, as mentioned by Jacob Geller.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I love Spiritfarer. I'm still playing through it in co-op with my girlfriend. We're having a wonderful time.
Ooh, how is co-op? Because I'm about halfway through that game and I love it too, but I've been debating whether I should jump in co-op now.
I can't imagine playing it any other way.
Really?
And it's so easily drop in, drop out. Like you'll have to explain things, of course, but you can totally just start playing a co-op. You just start. Second player plays as the little cat and can do almost everything except talk to people.
Yeah.
But can totally help manage everything on your boat. It's super fun, like dividing tasks that way.
Oh,
love
perfect.
it in co-op.
Eater writes in with a weird one, but an appreciated one, saying this was a fantastic year for video games. I'm currently playing Last of Us Part 2, Hades, Destiny 2 update, all three from this year's, and could be in my all-time favorites. The point is, Eater says, it's not a game, but a service that I think is underrated. Apple Arcade. I canceled it after the launch months with Grindstone and What the Golf, and got back into it recently because I subscribed to the big Apple One package to get the cloud storage mainly, and it turns out it's way better than I thought. The Path List, the Survivalist, A Monster's Expedition is a really cool, simple puzzle game. South of the Circle is a short and thrilling interactive story. So there we go. Eater fighting for Apple Arcade.
You know that the Chinese Room have a game on Apple Arcade?
Really?
Like the Dear Esther, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture people. It's called Little Orpheus, I think. I haven't played it because I don't have any Apple devices. Kind of makes me sad that it's trapped there, but I bet it's good.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get to see it elsewhere, but it's cool that
we're
Apple's still
starting
funding
to
this
see
stuff.
games pop off Apple Arcade, right?
Yeah.
As it's been like a year since launch, some licenses are up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There was a recent example of that.
Yeah, Hiroshi and I'm forgetting the name of the game. It's the Claymation. It's inspired game on Switch. It came out around the same time as Spiritfarer.
Right, perfect.
Switch.
There we go.
Yeah.
Uncle Crundle writes in
There it
with a
goes.
few. Journey of the Savage Planet, Paradise Killer, Umurangi Generation, and Ikenfell. Loved all these this year, and I definitely don't think they're getting the praise they deserve, except recently Umurangi is getting more and more press, which is awesome to see.
Yeah.
Thank you, Uncle Crundle.
What is
For letting me say your name.
Paradise Killer?
Yeah, I actually just started it literally last night.
Wow.
And it is a very, very vaporwavy adventure game kind of thing, which is weird. Like I tweeted about how it is giving off a lot of like the Silver Case, Flower, Sun, and Rain vibes from Suda 51, where you are this character called Lady Love Dies, and it has a very like convoluted setup in that you've been exiled off of this island for 3 million days. And like it is this island that is being rebuilt to like pay homage to these alien gods that they're trying to revive, like the Syndicate is trying to revive. But everything is just like there are just these floating skulls everywhere, a lot of palm trees, a lot of like pink and teal. And you're setting out to solve this murder of like the Syndicate Council was murdered, and it was like a kind of like a locked door mystery. So you don't know that for sure they're dead. But it's like, we haven't heard from them for long enough, and we found this guy's blood in his their blood in his stomach, so we kind of assume he's the murderer. But go talk to people on the island, and all the icons are just like these like JPEG like low quality like icons that you assume to be like, oh, okay, you found this clue, but it's just like a very low res version of like a skull or something. It's really stylistically, I think it's really cool. Don't go in with like super high expectations of the budget. Like everything, it looks like a game that definitely kind of reined it in and said like, let's just make all this stuff, all these weird assets that we have, like the centerpiece of this, because we don't have like a ton of fidelity. But the story so far I think is pretty interesting, and like definitely like super stylish.
There we go. Paradise Killer. Aiden Hanlon wrote in with one that flew completely under my radar, above my head, both those, saying, I've honestly been a bit confused by the lack of love that's been given to Legends of Runeterra this year. Maybe the game is just not doing well in terms of player base, or perhaps the flop that was Artifact has hurt media coverage of CCGs in general, but I've been shocked at how little I've seen on the many fantastic updates the game has received this year. They've had a good cadence of adding new cards, events into the game, all the while Ben loses his spot.
Mostly raising
Thank
money
you.
through cosmetics and giving away a steady amount of content for free to players. Mobile version's pretty smooth too. I'd recommend to anyone interested in a new CCG, whether a lapsed Hearthstone player or new to the genre. From the IGN review, the new gold standard for digital collectible card games.
I copied it in there because it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know what Legends of Runeterra even is. It's like, oh, that's right. Okay, it's the digital card game that's set in the League of Legends universe. But then the reviews are just off the charts. Like the fact that IGN is lavishing that praise on there, it probably deserves a second look from people out there. Leo, you're into this stuff. Did you check this one out?
Yeah, I mean, I got into Hearthstone despite being a WoW player. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to get into Legends of Runeterra despite not being a League of Legends player.
Right.
And yet, I haven't downloaded it.
Okay, so you didn't bounce off it. Okay, but
So
yeah.
what's going on?
Definitely worth another look. Real
That
quick too.
reminds me, though,
yeah.
of another game that I really enjoyed was Monster Train, the rogue like deck builder. That game was kind of like outside of my wheelhouse, and I had so much fun just picking it up because like if you're approaching a deck, if you're new to deck building in general, which I'm not super familiar with that, like those mechanics, like that isn't natural to me. It's like a rogue like deck builder, like Slay the Spire, I guess, as well, is like such a great place to start, and it did it really nicely.
Yeah, for sure. Oblivious writes in, I believe, talking about how it's not a game in particular, but how Pokemon had a great year this year, and they deserve some more love for everything they've done. And then also, God, I believe this is also Oblivious, saying a favorite of mine that got released in 2020 is the 1.0 release of Factorio. I'm sure fans of management sims were well aware of it, but if not, this game is an absolute time sink for people that that like to create sprawling factories. Tons of mods to increase replayability, make this on par with games like RimWorld in my book. Oh, yeah, I keep hearing about Factorio, but I haven't checked it out. Is it connected to the Satisfactory? I think those are from the same dev. But
I definitely hear them mentioned in the same breath a lot.
Right. Toby Martin writes in saying that Dreams is one of the overlooked games of this year. My favorite, most overlooked game is probably Dreams, which I know was in beta last year. But about a week after it launched, I rarely heard anyone talk about it, which is sad because it's something I love popping into each week and seeing the weird stuff other players have made. Holden Hintz also wrote in about the turn-based witch theme RPG called Ikenfell, which, yeah, he says that the combat feels somewhat similar to Earthbound. Oh, and it's overworld, and the combat is a cross between Paper Mario and Fire Emblem. Ikenfell does seem cool. Yeah, I started it. I've heard people compare the combat to Mega Man Battle Network as well. But Suriel, I remember throwing it your way because it does seem up your alley.
Yeah, I looked at like some of the trailers. I ended up not having time to download it, but I have heard like a lot of like, hey, this is really strong Earthbound vibes. Like people seem to really dig it. But yeah, that is definitely on my like increasingly enormous list of games that I should go back and play at some point.
Yeah, Ikenfell was that one.
Glad don't writes in. I thought I would just put my vote in for most underappreciated game this year, Troubleshooter: Abandoned Children.
That's not a real game, Leo.
It's a tactical RPG that was released last April, made by a small Korean indie studio, and it has depth and scope that puts games like XCOM to shame.
Jesus.
It has everything you could want and more for the genre, yet no one has heard of it. I'll just say that if you're a fan of the genre and don't mind some slightly funky translations, this game is still being updated and is worth a shot. Troubleshooter: Abandoned Children.
I know. I looked it up. It looks great. It's overwhelmingly positive on Steam. This was one of those where it's like, how did this completely slip by me? But yeah, good call, Gladon't. We have the names below in the description for folks. Doreen Clare wrote in talking about Resident Evil 3. She still feels like it's underrated. I kind of with you.
It's appropriately rated. I don't know.
I feel like not successful is not quite the same.
Yeah, you could be right. Mick Manga wrote in, says, well, thinking of underappreciated games of 2020, might I bring up Rune Factory 4 Special? I feel like it came out so close to Animal Crossing New Horizons, it got buried, but if you give it a shot, you'll find one of the best farming sim games of the year. And shout out to The Longing for being one of the most interesting indie games of the year that no one has played. I don't want to spoil anything. This game blew my mind. So The Longing, I looked it up on Steam. It is so weird. It's apparently almost like an idle game where you're just kind of like this little demon waiting for your king to awaken, and you're in the underground. It looks fun and weird, and I am so excited. I'm going to stream this and maybe some other games that are from this underrated list tomorrow on our Twitch channel.
Streaming it will not be the most eventful thing.
Is it just super slow and that's kind of the charm of it?
It's kind of a waiting game in a really cool way, but it's like intellectually interesting, probably more than like people watching you play it interesting.
All right, maybe not, but I definitely want to check it out.
Hey,
yeah.
Look at it for sure.
Okay, so you played a decent amount of it?
I haven't started it yet, but I know about it. I know its shtick, and it is really fascinating.
Okay, awesome. The Longing is the name of that one. Leo, do you want to read out the rest of these?
Sure. Felipe Mosquito writes, maybe critically it's at the deserved level, but it seems to me that commercially and in terms of the gaming community conversation, Crash Bandicoot 4, it's about time, isn't as hot, and IMO deserves more praise. It both brought the best aspects of the classics while giving some modern twists that didn't feel like gimmicks, only making it a better game. Maybe the $60 price tag hurt it, but it has a lot of content that justifies its asking price. Back me up here, Hansen.
Yeah, hell yeah. Crash 4 rules.
Jake Zielsdorf brings up Predator Hunting Grounds.
Love it.
That had disappeared from my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I had a ton of fun playing it earlier this year with friends and picked it up again recently. It came out around when COVID lockdowns began. It was a great way to spend time with friends. Bob Buell, of course, writes, I gotta say the most underappreciated game of 2020 is Mario 35. Is it perfect? Of course not. But I feel like it didn't even make a splash, and it certainly deserves better than that. Yeah, why didn't anybody care about that?
I don't know. I think, judging from Giant Bomb at least, it seemed like, I remember Gersman talking about the indie scene had done it better, had taken the Mario Party or Mario concept with the Battle Royale, and then it was nuked from orbit from Nintendo. So maybe that the hardcore Nintendo fans already knew about that indie version, so they're not as into this lesser version that Nintendo made. I don't know.
Maybe. Ryan writes, with all the nonstop hype around Cyberpunk 2077, I'm surprised I haven't heard more about Cloudpunk, which is, in my opinion, the best Cyberpunk game on the market right now. You're a taxi driver in a cyberpunk city, just driving people from place to place, picking up lore and little stories that just kind of build up the dystopic city that you're living in. There's no combat and no real gameplay, aside from driving around in a flying car and occasionally getting out to pick up collectibles and talk to people. It's always raining, it's always night, there's neon signs, there's flying cars.
The game
really
is
fantastic.
so pretty. It's worth just like looking at it.
Really?
It's gorgeous looking. Yeah.
Yeah, weren't they going to do a first-person version or something? I feel like last time I checked into it, there was going to be a better way to play it than third-person flying the little car around. I don't know. I feel like I was waiting for it to be VR or something, but it does look amazing.
Yeah. People are loving it on Steam, but yeah, Cloudpunk is the name of that one.
Cloudpunk. Finally, Hayden Hodge writes, Doom Eternal is hugely underrated, or at least misunderstood. Did you know that at any given time there are 4 cooldowns and 3 meters to keep track of? It is a truly fresh FPS, one that plays more like a MOBA than a Call of Duty.
Wow. Yeah, I like the AAA stuff.
I can see that. I definitely have it still on my top 10, but I definitely like that is a game that is hard to talk about because I definitely think it's a shooter that is a lot better on PC, where you can actually manage how much that game is throwing at you versus playing it with a controller, which I tried, and it's definitely like significantly harder and less fun when you're playing it with a controller for sure.
Gotcha. But yeah, I want to check out some of these games. So I'll be streaming them on our Twitch channel. So twitch.tv/MinnMax show. You can follow us there. And I'm probably going to be streaming on Friday. So follow us there and come in and say hi. We'd appreciate it. So those are the under the radar games. But you might be asking, what is the most above the radar? Well, the Game Awards on Thursday, December 10th will tell you. The big old Keeley Awards. We'll be streaming our reactions for that one. Always fun to have the Game Awards, and then also should be some reveals. Things are bubbling for what might be popping up there already, so it should be fun to react to some stuff. I mean, last year they revealed the Series X, for Christ's sake. But they are going to have the big award, the Game of the Year 2020. The contestants are Doom Eternal, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Final Fantasy VII Remake, Ghost of Tsushima, Hades, and The Last of Us Part 2. The big old Jeff Keighley Awards, where it's community voted. Well, so hang on.
Well, it's like, okay, to just we weren't on this ballot this time, but
Right.
like during the Game Informer days, Andy at some point would send around a ballot saying like, "Hey, I need help filling this out. Do you guys like? And here are a bunch of categories that we can nominate people for. You can write in whatever you want, but like they limit you to 5, and so we would fill that out and then send it in. So I think it does that for a bunch of outlets. So I think it is in like the nominees I think are from a wide variety of press outlets, and then the voting I think is also from the press outlets. But I think there's a lot of the categories are also just community voted, I think.
So it's 10% of the community vote going in for the weight, and then 90% from these press outlets. Yeah, which we weren't included in it, but that's fine because now we get a completely cold read on this. But it's interesting to try and keep in mind that, yes, the deadline for that was, I think, early-ish in November, middle of November. And so that's why a lot of the Falls games aren't on here. So it feels like Game of the Year 2020 is basically first half of 2020. But, Leo, what do you think, looking at these candidates?
Alex in our Backstage Pass chat got it from me exactly. It should be Ghost of Tsushima, but it'll probably be Last of Us Part 2.
I'm trying to think of when Hades was at its peak. Because if people were filling out this ballot while they were loving Hades, the most they ever loved it, there's a chance that could squeak by.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's definitely the one that I would like this.
I think that it should be Hades and it will be Ghosts of Tsushima.
really,
I think I think that's going to win. I don't think Last of Us 2 is going to be the sweep that people think it's going to be.
Okay, please send Jacob Geller that clip after Last of
do
Us
it,
is
man.
just the sweep of the century. I think especially for all the other categories where like best direction, best writing, best performance, I think Last of Us is going to mop the F up during the game.
Okay, sure. And all the like kind of technical ones and which I include performance in because it's video games. But I don't think it's going to take best.
I think it will. I think especially sending it out to all these outlets, the game that everybody can agree was so impressive. I don't think it's the most interesting choice, but
that's why I think I'm kind of with Jacob in that I think Ghost of Tsushima has a real shot because it is, I think Last of Us Part 2, I think the general consensus is that it's kind of divisive, which is a weird way to frame that.
Yeah.
But it's like people either really loved it or they were kind of like, I don't know that I like the direction it took. Whereas I think Ghost of Tsushima is a game that is like somewhat difficult to hate. Like I like the way a lot of people maybe were really turned off by The Last of Us, and everyone's just like, yeah, that game's pretty good. And so like in terms of especially like the larger your staff is, the more likely that people are going to say if they do any kind of ranked choice voting, I could see Ghost of Tsushima like squeaking by in terms of it was on the most number of lists, higher on average maybe than The Last of Us.
Yeah. All right, let's lock it in. I'm predicting Last of Us Part 2 will win the Game Awards for Game of the Year. Serial, what do you think?
I think it'll be The Last of Us Part 2, but I would love it for it to be Hades.
Yeah. Anna?
Yeah, same. I also think it's Last of Us Part 2, but yeah.
Animal Crossing, does it have a shot?
I think that Animal Crossing had like too many game sort of play issues I don't know. Again, it's this whole thing. It's like, do we judge the game like by the gameplay or its social relevance? Like, What is your priority when you're picking Game of the Year? Like, if you're talking about like overall impact, like I think Animal Crossing is it. Like, it brought an entire new demographic into gaming during the pandemic. But
yeah,
I don't know.
But Last of Us. And Geller? Oh, sorry, Geller. You think it's going to be Ghost of Tsushima?
I think it's going to be Tsushima.
That's bold choice.
Just going out there.
All right, and Leo?
I'm going to say it will be Hades because I stand to gain more. I've over-unders better.
It's like the equivalent of guessing 21 when someone guessed 20. It's just like, I've got all the other ground covered, basically.
Precisely.
Might as well go.
And there is money on the line for this.
And we can say MinnMax guessed it.
That's
okay,
right.
well, in that case, I'm switching mine to Animal Crossing.
Well, I can't all go out the window.
I'll switch to Alex. I'll switch to Alex just so that between the five of us, I think we have as many nominees.
And then we can go back and be like, wow,
and then we can all
have guessed every single nomination.
I can't believe it was Doom Eternal. None of us got it right.
Yeah, we're like one of those octopuses with the Super Bowl or whatever. We're running a streak. And that's a reference for everybody, I think. Hey, Jacob Geller, thanks for being here today.
My absolute pleasure. Go look at my YouTube channel. It's good.
If you had one video that you'd want people to check out, what would it be?
I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I think my best video is also one of the most viewed, which is called Fear of Depths. It's about caves and not much about games at all, but I will make you interested in caves.
There we go. Check it out. The link is in the description. Perfect. Thank you for being here, Jacob. We appreciate it, dude.
My pleasure. Goodbye.
Suriel Vasquez.
Hello?
Do you know how this whole thing operates?
So I plug in the mic and it goes into the court, and then I'm talking to you through the internet, which Al Gore invented, and then that's part of our Patreon.
That's right. And our Patreon is ultimately just a series of ones and zeros. But if you go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, you can check out the benefit tier that's just right for you. If you support us at any tier, you can jump into the Discord, which is a real Shangri-La on the internet, just the nicest community that I've ever encountered on the internet. And if you support us at a higher tier, we'll read a plug for you on the very podcast you're listening to right now. Isn't that right, Leo Vader?
That's exactly right.
Woo!
Hey, speaking of which, this is just something I've been thinking about. Have you ever felt out of sync with gaming news?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, it feels like we only ever talk about games on this stupid show. You get synced up with the Synced Up podcast, a fellow Central Time Zone podcast that covers everything from gaming opinions, detailed recaps of the weekly gaming news, and fun games sprinkled in between. Back in February, we decided to finally take the leap. This is not me anymore. It would be weird if I was thinking this. This is the Synced Up podcast talking.
I see.
We decided to finally take the leap and chase our podcasting dreams, and we haven't stopped since. You can find the audio version by searching Synced Up Podcast in your favorite podcasting service and look for the blue and white logo. Or if you prefer video, you can find us over at youtube.com/syncedupodcast. This is SYNC, I should say, not like kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Where we also have other gaming-related content. If you check us out and decide to stay, you can look forward to new upcoming impressions and non-gaming related shows too. Again, that's youtube.com/syncedupodcast or search Synced Up Podcast in your favorite podcasting service. We hope to see you there.
Awesome. Thank you, Synced Up Podcast, for supporting MinnMax. We hope our community has been checking out your show. Your latest episode on YouTube and in the podcast feed is about, did you hear about this? About this scalper, this SOB that bought 3,500 PlayStation 5s. It's been hoarding them.
That was me, actually. Sorry, folks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can I get one of those?
God, I got to listen to this episode of Synced Up Podcast. Talk all about it. But then also,
if you support MinnMax at the $10 tier, I'll sell you one for like a more normal price.
There it is, everybody. Wow. The new system. But then Synced Up Podcast also has, looks like a review for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity on their YouTube channel as well. So be sure to thank them for supporting us in a big way and throw a sub or a comment their way. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. Also, thanks to I Am 8-Bit for their support of MinnMax. We appreciate it. They want you to know that they have the PlayStation 5 physical edition of The Pathless from Annapurna. The PlayStation 5 physical edition. It comes with a giant fold-out poster, reversible cover, a sheet collectible art cards, there's a set of 6, exclusive artwork by Emmy winner Elaine Lee, and it's worldwide compatible. So check that out. They also have the double vinyl on the double album on vinyl for The Pathless, composed by Austin Winnery. It's a very unique and great soundtrack, so you can check that out at I Am 8-Bit store. And anything in that I Am 8-Bit store, which is oh so wonderful. If you're looking for great Christmas presents, it's a great place to go. And anything in that store for under $100, you can use the promo code to get 10% off. And of course, the promo code this month is MinnMaxmas. So all caps, MINNMAX. MAS, so MinnMaxmas for 10% off everything in that store. And they are so great. They support our community by shipping out something from their store every single week to whoever we deem as the Question of the Week winner. And this week, they are shipping out the Cuphead double album vinyl soundtrack. A fantastic soundtrack. I think we auctioned one of these off for Extra Life and it went for Buco Dolores, so the fact that they're giving these away to our community is wonderful, and you can go thank them for being so generous by checking out their store. They have a lot of wonderful stuff in there, and do some Christmas shopping. Use that promo code.
Need to quickly say that I was the person who bought that. My name is Buco Dolores.
Oh, really?
That's my alias that I go by. Only when I buy things on auction, though.
Oh, perfect. Nice of you to be here, Buco.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right, let's really pay attention to these and choose the absolute number one Question of the Week, because they're getting a great prize. Cooper Murphy. Contender? Let's find out. They say, do you guys ever... a typo out of the gate. Yeah, really rough start here. Cooper says, well, we'll reword it. Do you guys ever think about elderly gaming? Right now, people that are 60 plus didn't grow up with games, so it makes sense there ain't that much gaming going on in the old folks' home. But I assume that when we get there, we'll be playing games more than ever. That being said, do you think the industry will adapt and make gaming more accessible / market towards the elderly as time goes on? Personally, I can't wait to join an old geezer melee league. I will
say that my partner's grandfather is the best Dr. Mario player I've ever seen in my entire life.
Really?
Like he would blow like professional grade level Dr. Mario player. So elderly people do game. Fight the stigma.
I feel like you were missing an out of the water comment there, but I hear you. Do you think there's a way for him to play it? Or does he have an NES or how's he playing the sucker?
NES, yeah.
Oh, that's so weird. Because I just assume all old folks' homes, it's still just a Wii that they're all playing there.
Yeah, I mean, this is like their family NES, and they still have it like at their cabin or whatever. And so when they go, they all watch him play Dr. Mario.
That does seem fun. You could blow his mind by giving him a Dr. Luigi at some point. You wouldn't know what to do with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think I think about this too much, but I assume just the industry will naturally adapt, and probably by that time that we're all old and in the old folks' home, there will be so many accessible controllers on the market that it won't be too much of an issue, I just imagine.
Yeah, I don't. So I think with music, it's one thing because I think people just end up listening to whatever they grew up with in like their mid-20s. So, but like with movies, like you'll see the occasional, like maybe not now, but like you'll see the occasional like, oh, this movie's very clearly marketed towards, people in their 60s or whatever. I'm very curious to see what games like that look like, because I sometimes think about like, something like, for example, Devil May Cry. Am I going to be playing that when I'm 67 years old? And like there are other people in the old folks home, which is where everyone's going to go by the time I'm that age. They're just gonna be like, oh, like I'm reading a book about submarines or whatever, and then like, no, I'm playing this game about this demon hunter who is like, thematically it just seems so weird that I would still be doing that. But there are like every once in a while you'll see stories of people who are like, no, I still invest very much in like anime like statues and stuff, even though I'm like whatever age. So I'm
that's funny.
I'm very curious to see what that is like, more so than like, will the industry pivot to them? Because I think accessibility is how you do that, right?
I think it's going to be a bigger thing than people realize. In the same way that, I'm just basing this off Twilight Zone, but in the same way that, a bunch of geezers get together now and they're like, let's play Kick the Can, woo! Or they, hoot and holler over Bridge or whatever. I seriously think they will have like CRTs hooked up in old folks' homes in the future. It'll be like, hey, play some Melee, everybody. We have some computers. You can do a LAN StarCraft match if you want. I think it'll make sense.
It is weird because, like, I think specifically the Melee example is going to be hard to imagine, because even like people in their 20s talk about like, oh yeah, playing professional Melee gave me like repetitive stress injuries.
Right.
Like I cannot play this game competitively anymore. It destroyed my hands. So like, obviously you don't have to play Melee that way, but even on a level of like, my hands aren't what they used to be, and like I can't play this game as well as I used to. Like, is that going to be a thing, or will people just gravitate towards like, we've all been playing a lot of competitive Civ, like, and that is that is where we've all gotten really into, kind of shifts genres as you get older. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of games thematically like tied to kind of like catering towards seniors. But I almost wonder, because you think about, the proliferation of like dad games, right? Does that eventually evolve on some level into the, the proliferation of grandpa games, which is like games where, like, it's all about grandfathers, because that's where all the designers are now, right? Like they've all had grandchildren, so it's like, I'm gonna make a game about my grandchildren.
Oh, so you're saying the game will be about Atreus' son in God of War?
Exactly. Yeah. So it'll still be about Kratos, but it'll be about his relationship with Atreus' son instead of, or like just the idea of, I can't believe Atreus sent me off to the old folks mountain or whatever.
Do you okay, top 3 grandparents in gaming. Go.
The boss.
She's not a grandparent.
Professor Oak.
Is he a grandfather?
Ooh,
yeah,
Professor Oak's
Gary's
great. Yes, absolutely. That's number 1. The boss. I mean, has Ocelot had kids? No.
I guess maybe not. Yeah. Or isn't it? No. Well, Ava just had kids, right? Like Big Mama. Right.
I don't think Big Mama had.
I don't think either of them had children, right? So
no. You got to stop barking up that tree. You got to let Metal Gear go. Unless it's like, I mean, maybe the End had some grandkids, but still ill-defined.
He had some foliage.
What about don't you see some Zelda grandparents in Wind Waker? Isn't it like the grandma on the island or whatever?
Grandma in Wind Waker, yeah.
Okay.
She's kind of up there. I don't think she's like enough of a present character in the story, but I have to imagine there are better, but she's a good one.
Adrian Torres here.
The bar's high here for grandparents.
It's really hard. Adrian Torres in the Backstage Pass says the grandfather in Stardew Valley. Yep. We stand a legend for that grouper.
This skinny legend.
Yeah. Ooh, interesting. Panda Hands, old Cranky Kong.
Yeah.
So the list is overfloweth, but I think Serial's right. In 50 years, it's going to be nothing but grandpas.
The walking simulators will get a lot slower.
Oh, exactly what the internet's been screaming for.
Or they'll get faster. Because,
MLA writes in and says, do you think games on the PlayStation 5 / Series X will eventually spare us the choice between frame rate and fidelity? Or do you think this will be the selling point of pro models of the consoles? I will swallow my tongue if they try and pull that marketing out of, for the 3rd console launch in a row, if they try and sell an Xbox Series X Pro, and then it's like, now you can run at 4K and 60, which
You know it's gonna be 120 like 120 hertz, like 8K or whatever. You know, like they're just gonna up the numbers on it until.
How many times can you beat that drum? They've already hit that drum so many times.
Well, I don't even think it's about whether or not that beat is successful. It's about the fact that like at some point like they gotta sell the new hardware, and you know to some degree it helps to sell the new TVs, right? To say like, oh yeah, this 8K display that you're not really sure if you can tell the difference on, like this is the machine to optimized for it, right? Like it's gonna happen.
That's the thing though, is I don't think in 5 years they're gonna be able to make a system that can run 8K games at 60 frames per second. I think it'll still be a choice.
Right, I think you're right.
And even now it's like Siege on PS5, you choose between 4K 60 or 1080 120.
Right.
And I think that might still be the choice for a long time.
Yeah, I believe for Ori, it's 120 4K, or you can choose between 6K 60. It gets so funky and weird, but actually I've been testing this whole stuff a lot because I got a new TV. I was shamed too much on Instagram for my old TV. So I just said, all right, I'm all in. And I got that 4K, that LG CX thing. And it's like this 55-inch TV. And it's like a foot away from me. So I've been soaking this stuff in. And I've been looking for areas just to test it out. And so, yeah, playing Ori at 120. I played Gears 5's multiplayer just to experience 120. And overall, you know, a little underwhelming. Obviously, not as big of a leap as it is from 30 to 60. I would love to blindfold people and then quiz them on what is the frame rate here? What is the resolution? I think guesses would be all over the place. But I set up that new TV. It's good. I'm enjoying it. But I cannot describe how satisfying it was to, once I had it all set up, to peel the plastic off the front of that TV over the entire screen. It was ecstasy.
I mean, maybe they could pivot to that. That's the next selling point for TVs is more fun to peel than our competitors.
I think it's a note. None of the consoles had good peel on them.
Yeah.
I wanted to peel something off that Xbox. Every single side of that cube, please give it to me now. Nothing.
Yeah. It should come in an oversized version of itself where you're slowly stripping like a black monolith that you get to peel the layers off of.
Right.
They really should spend more money on packaging.
Yeah, or somehow make like the on switch for the PS5 like bubble wrap, and you have to pop one to turn it off and pop another one to turn it off.
Yeah. You have to build the Rube Goldberg machine that has to turn on your PlayStation 5 every time, so it's like a 30-second sequence that it just every time it ends with like some whatever those words are called that kind of drip water, and that ends up being the thing that hits your PlayStation 5's power button.
What?
Makes sense.
That's a good point.
I know what you're talking about. Matt Lynch says, I can't think of indie underappreciated games this year, but you guys are the most underappreciated gamers. Come on, Matt. Anyways, I recently got a Series X and Game Pass after never owning an Xbox One. Oh, I downloaded Gears 5 because it's supposed to look great. It does! And I enjoyed the first Gears on 360. I thought I'd be able to get the gist of the story since the first one was just big beefy men, good, big beefy alien things bad. Apparently a lot of other things have happened since the first one, and I have no clue what is happening in the story. Have you all ever made a big jump in games that have a linear story before, and did it affect your enjoyment of it?
I made the jump after playing Yakuza 0 and Kiwami. I made the jump to 6 because that was the one that came out right after that. And I don't think it really harmed my experience too much.
Really?
I mean, they have like these synopses, like the first section of the game is like you can basically go read like the important bits from all the other games. But I guess I'm less kind of compelled to always like, oh, I got to make sure I got to stay up on it. I feel like as long as you have the gist of it, I think it's fine. And those games specifically feel very episodic in terms, like they're usually pretty self-contained outside of like some recurring things. So there's a I forget what her name is, but in Yakuza 1, Kiryu starts taking care of this little girl, and by 6 she's a teenager, right? She's like she's had this kind of weird pop idol career. But like I feel like I can make that logical leap of, okay, some stuff has happened. As long as you can kind of come into a story and say like some stuff has happened, it's fine. I really feel like, oh, I'm very confused about this, and so like I still really like Yakuza 6 a lot.
Yeah. trying to think. It's not like the deepest entry, obviously, but I played BioShock Infinite without playing any BioShocks before it, which is like, okay, that's fine. You kind of get the gist. Lighthouse has got it. But the part that was weird was I played BioShock Infinite's DLC, Burial at Sea, which is all just fan service and expansion of BioShock 1 before playing BioShock 1. And so I remember like enjoying it fine, but just nothing had a big impact on me in the way it was obviously intended to. So I messed that up. But then obviously I went back and played BioShock 1 to get my gamer card. So you can't judge me for that. Anybody else have an example of that?
I mean, I played Miles Morales without, fully playing the first Spider-Man game. That was the most recent, example of that I could find. And that was, that's kind of like designed, to not need that prior knowledge. I don't know if you felt like the story from the first game really helped you experience the game more fully, but you just click through the synopsis at the beginning of the game. I felt pretty good to go.
You get the idea that Miles was bit by a spider at some point, even if the way that it happens in that Spider-Man game is very silly, where I think like the spider rides in a box that Mary Jane was carrying for like hours and hours, and then the second she sets it down, then it jumps on Miles. It's a very weird situation. But anyways, Rich McLaughlin says, hello, everyone.
Hello, Rich.
Thank you. Perfect. What's the cohorts' take on emulation, whether it's game preservation, accessibility, or ease of use? Do you have any thoughts on the topic?
Love it.
Yeah, it's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Do it.
If you own the original copy, or are you going full pirate, do what you want, let your freak...
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
We've learned over these years that it is up to us to preserve these games, and I don't know, the more people have it, the better. I think it's maybe past a certain number of years if you want to be, if you want to have morals about it, but I think it's just good that these games get to live on beyond their systems and beyond their physical printings.
Yeah.
I try to buy games, obviously as much as possible, but I think it from that historical angle is definitely where I approach it from. Of like, I have a copy of Paper Mario the 1,000-Year Door, but it is so much easier for me now to set up, like an emulator to get it running, even though I have a copy sitting in my house. So in that case, it's like, yeah, it's fine. But even if I didn't, like, even if I had lost my copy at some point, like, as long as you have paid for that game, I think it's fine. But in general, I don't necessarily like to like, okay, Cyberpunk is out, let me go pirate it. I think that to me feels like a thing where it's okay, that's a little weird. But I think Leo's right in that like companies don't really do a fantastic job. I think a lot of the time, a lot of community-driven efforts to preserve that stuff outpace them completely. Yeah, and so I think it's like straight up important to support those endeavors, because like the companies always do, like in a lot of cases, the bare minimum to preserve those games.
Yeah, I felt a little weird playing an emulator of the Apple II when Anna and I streamed Oregon Trail a couple months ago. When was that? Last month or something? But it's like, well, I guess I own those games back in the day, although who even knows? I mean, it's some probably copied copy of a floppy at that point. So yeah, I think that was kind of like a little barrier of like, okay, I feel comfortable streaming emulation in these specific instances here at MinnMax. So
should have gotten Apple II.
Yeah, you're right. Figured out some way to get that video signal out. That would have been a really fun challenge.
Yeah, should have gotten an Apple II with HDMI.
Michael Lynch says, hey, CLCs, you were discussing soups last week, and I have the perfect controversial statement to make. Peanut butter on bread is perfect for dipping into your chicken noodle soup. These two things should not go together, yet they hold each other in a warm, delicious embrace.
I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, like peanut sauce is what? It's peanut butter, soy sauce. Like,
yeah,
it's okay. I love, you dip your spring roll in peanut sauce.
It's true.
I can weirdly see the noodle peanut thing. It works.
I think like the buttery liquid part is the part that's freaking me out. Butter and peanut butter shouldn't go together. There's something about like the soup part that I don't think works. But if it's just
I feel like my food, like Twitter has ruined any kind of conversations about food, because everyone's always trying to like come up with their like hot take, like, oh, cereal is a soup, or like so I've just become completely immune to anything being surprising about food, just because like, yeah, just eat whatever. Like, you don't need the validation of like this is this thing, or like here's like, dipping whatever into whatever. Just eat whatever you want, man.
Boneless wings aren't wings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like put ketchup on your pancakes. I don't care. Just eat whatever you feel, whatever you like. I just get frustrated because it's like everyone tries to pitch their opinions as being more controversial than they are. And with food being like the most personal thing in the world in terms of like, you literally have different tastes than everybody else. So yeah, it's fine. Put peanut butter in your soup. Go with God.
I want to eat man.
Well, okay. Well, then you go into legal territories, but if they consent, I guess.
This is. Have you all ever seen the CNN interview video with the guy? He interviews like cannibals.
Ooh, what?
Okay, he's
like
a religious studies correspondent, and he goes, and the video is very controversial because it really, there's really rich religious tradition. He goes to like the most niche, like most sort of, like there are problems behind how this coverage is working. But we watched this on Sarahpod's stream the other day. It's okay. Let's see here. CNN cannibal. Sorry guys. If you just search CNN cannibal, it's with Resla Aslan.
Oh yeah, okay. But the point is he enjoying it or?
Well, so he's like sitting down with this cannibal, and like he's getting more and more uncomfortable, and he eats human brain, and then there's a point where this guy like smears this stuff all over his face, and he asks the translator like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, those are the human ashes," and he's like, "Oh," and then this other guy who's interviewing puts like a crown of like bones on him, and he's just like straight up to the camera like, maybe this was a mistake.
It's good.
And then they aired that.
Huh?
They aired that.
They aired that. They really aired that, Serial. I was shocked. I was like, this reflects so poorly on you, but hey, it's entertainment, I guess.
Entertainment. I mean, I remember hearing somewhere that like turns out humans taste really good. And I remember hearing somewhere too that like people that have eaten chimpanzees, people are like, chimpanzees are freaking delicious. And the fact that we're so close to chimpanzees, that like backs it up. We now have several sources that humans are the tastiest food, I think, on Earth.
MinnMax episode a million.
Imagine like having that come up on like, whatever recommendation service you get, like Pinterest, where it's like, or like you see someone on Discord be like, bro, low key like people. They taste good. Like you should try people.
Dude, you want some people? I mean, Leo, have we talked about this before? We probably talked about cannibalism a lot.
About that time you ate people?
Yeah, no, but Leo, if I made test tube human meat, but it was actually human meat, would you eat it?
Yeah.
What if it was like genetically your mother's meat?
That'd probably cross a line for me. But if there was just human meat that was like, yeah, this dude died a few minutes ago of natural causes, we prepared this for you. It's right here. We're just going to throw it away. If you don't want it, I would eat it.
Wait, not even test tube? You just eat a dead man?
I like the situation where someone dies and the first instinct is not for them to get like an autopsy, for them to go to the morgue. It's just like, look, if someone doesn't eat it, we have to throw it away.
That's usually the coroner's first line. Yeah. Does anybody want dibs on this first?
Someone ordered human and they didn't come get it. So someone has to eat this man.
Oh. Okay. Anna, just to look, we're already down this rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Let's go. Not Leo's freaky. For the audio listeners, he's licking his lips now as well. That's really unnerving. But for the audio listeners, never mind. The point is, Anna, if human meat was grown in a test tube and you're like, hey, you want to try this human steak? Could you make human steak? And then you're like, sure. And you're chewing it. And then somebody said, by the way, that was made from your DNA. Would that weird you out? Or would weird you out more if somebody said, like, by the way,
it's my DNA?
Yeah, versus like, by the way, that's your boyfriend's DNA. Like, what would be weirder, to be eating your own flesh
or my boyfriend's? I think it would be weirder to be eating my boyfriend's, because I feel like there's an extent to which like I exist in my own body. Like,
Yeah.
aren't I consuming myself all of the time in the act of aging? I don't know.
I think that's what aging is. It's just eating yourself from the inside
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah. It's just eating yourself slowly over time, and you're regenerating.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess time's kind of eating us slowly, like a little nibble at a time.
But I think I would spit it out in both circumstances.
And then no
though.
matter how far away Leo was, he would catch it before it hit the floor in his mouth.
Yeah, because that's prime steak. That probably costs like, how much do you think a human steak costs?
Filet mignon. Hey, Darkfish Days wrote in, get a load of this, saying, would you be more or less interested in free living games if they had a scheduled server shutdown end date? Weird question. More or less interested?
My gut was more, but now that I think about it, I feel like knowing that my whatever progress I made would disappear would probably make me less interested.
But I think I would be more just for the historical angle of, I gotta get in and check this thing out just in case it's ever relevant. I want to write this down as a game I technically played so I can keep my big tally rolling.
Right.
I would maybe play it, but I don't know that I would get invested in it,
Right.
Of course. Joshua Wiljanen writes in and says, hey, Benny and the Benny Singers. Sure. I love RPG battle systems, but hate fantasy and anime. Eternal Sonata, for example, is an absolute masterclass in combat, but I can't stand the rest of the game. What am I to do?
I mean, you can maybe this year play Yakuza Like a Dragon. I know it abides by a lot of like the storytelling conventions, but it's not anime. Like insofar as like the aesthetic is very like anime. I think it passes that test of like it is not, and it is a very much J drama. I would say that it is very much in that mold. But I think that I maybe gets past a lot of that superficial kind of like, I just don't like the way this looks. Which there are certainly some games that I have that kind of reaction to, but I think I'm okay with you. I think you should at least try Yakuza.
I think that's true. I think, the writing in Yakuza I think is so good that if it's the writing in anime that really drives you nuts, I don't think that'll be the case in Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Yeah. There's definitely not like a Paimon-esque character, for example.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
Yakuza.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Paimon tangent. Did you see that the voice actor who voices Paimon like made a video is basically like, my boyfriend doesn't listen to my Paimon dialogue while playing Genshin Impact. It was the funniest thing. I can post it. That could be my get a load of this later on. I can send you the link. But in that note, like also I feel like you're kind of safe if you try older JRPGs, like even if there are some of the sort of like anime tropes baked into them a little bit, or like the character design is a little anime inspired. Like if it's a Super Nintendo game, you're not gonna like, I don't know, have
it's more tame.
Yeah, it's definitely more tame. Like you could play Chrono Trigger, right? Like is that too anime?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Alex Bernigar says, hey, cohorts, if you weren't working in the gaming industry, what do you think you'd be doing? Do you have a secondary passion you'd follow, or did you have a fallback job in case working in this industry didn't work out? Tricky. Somebody have a thought on that?
I think I definitely entered the industry more through writing than like, I want to do whatever it takes to cover video games. So like, I just want to write and I like video games. So those are the two things I'm putting together. So I think I would like to imagine that I would be a writer in some way, but I'd probably either end up being a teacher or maybe a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Teacher.
Yeah, because I think like I took English in college, which is like kind of a path that you go on to be a teacher. But I'm definitely glad that I'm in this field and not teaching, because like it seems relatively thankless. But I also did kick around the idea, and I never really followed through on it, of being a lawyer, just because I like the kind of min-maxing of rules, if you will, of just like, okay, if I know this rule and this rule, so I can put this two together and kind of make an opening argument along those lines.
Do you
and I also just like those Ace Attorney games.
That's what I was gonna say. I just like those games, man.
I could do this. And this guy is I just go around 4 environments and pick up 3 clues. I could do that.
You are doing it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I'd probably just stay on the path that I was on before I got into the game industry of just, video production is kind of the easy fallback, right? Of just probably being a producer at some marketing agency or something draining like that. But actually, I take it back. I don't think it was that draining. Like all the video production stuff I did before getting into games, I still loved all those videos, and I was almost as enthusiastic about editing, even when it was a boring topic. I just enjoyed the process so much that I think it would have been okay-ish. Although, Leah, I don't know if you have this. It's mainly just a weird insecurity, but I remember, back in 2008, 2009, when I was really pushing to get into the video field and, applying for jobs and all this stuff, I felt like, all right, I'm pretty competitive with my competition out there. And then starting around like 2012, 2013 or so, every demo reel I see, I'm just like, how am I supposed to compete with this? They have like 14 drones flying up their butt with like a shotgun mic the size of Utah. It's like, I can't compete as a video producer out there anymore.
Yeah, I think you're just gonna have to take it to the next level and like eat a man in a video.
So I pitch my video production services, and the demo reel is just footage crudely shot of me eating flesh.
Yeah, I mean that will definitely make you stand out.
All right,
a drone drops a human steak with a GoPro on it, and you catch it in your mouth.
And it's just like that Jurassic World shot of the dinosaur jumping up out of the water to eat it.
Precisely.
Yeah. Okay.
I absolutely have that. I don't feel like a video producer at all. I feel like I just happen to have that be my job.
It's funny how that works out. Yeah. I think it's also, like Alex Van Aken, who just got hired at Game Informer. Like I looked at some of his stuff and I'm like, everything is shot so well. How am I supposed to compete with that? He like understands cameras. That's not fair competition.
How am I a job at Game Informer?
I don't know, everybody.
I always wanted to be a writer in like a TV sitcom. That was my dream for a long time. Just be in a writer's room for something funny, which I still think would be super fun.
Yeah.
And the little tastes I've gotten of that over the years working on projects has been, I love that stuff.
What situation comes to mind when you think of simulating a writer's room in your real life?
Like E3 Kings, doing that with Jeff Cork, of like sitting down, having the TV in front of us and like bringing up the footage and like, what about this moment? What can we do with this? And just spitballing stuff back and forth. And just so many trash jokes for the one that breaks through. It was like, yes, it was worth discussing this. We found it.
Yeah.
And also just like breaking stories too on things like Games Are Dumb for Kids. Actually like thinking through how a story might go is very satisfying. And doing what makes sense and is feasible, I love that process.
Yeah. Why don't you do more of that?
I'm trying.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's different stuff for like your personal channel. Would you ever try and go and tackle something larger and more narrative? I know there's like a narrative theme running throughout, but I don't know. Do you feel like you're breaking stories for your personal essays?
Specifically for this month, yes.
Oh,
actually, but that has definitely been a goal, and certainly when it's not COVID time, I would love to be collaborating more and doing things like that.
Yeah,
but it's more a dream than something I get to do very much or do very much.
Ian T. Clark says, so far I've played 27 games that have released this calendar year. Of those 27, I've only rolled credits on 5 of them. Some of these new games like Spellbreak and Bleeding Edge aren't games that have traditional campaigns. What percentage of new releases do you typically see through to the end, or at least give a significant amount of your time?
Small.
I think I have a pretty good track record, but I think it also means I played way fewer games.
Yeah.
I think there are very few. I'm looking at like my list of every game I've played, and I feel like I've finished most of them.
That's amazing. I would love to compare this at the end of the year. What's that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I would say like the biggest one that I haven't finished is Ghost of Tsushima. I think that is probably one that I ended up putting down partway through. And I technically have Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which I feel is aspirational because I don't know if I'll at this point I don't know if I'll have time to get around to it, let alone finish it.
Oh God!
And after playing Immortals, I'm basically like, well, I got my open world fix. What's that? There's another 70-hour game, and that is a very similar genre to play.
Yeah, that's tough. I've been going back to Valhalla actually. When I got my new TV, I wanted something to just kind of show it off, push it to its limits a little bit. And I was like, okay, Valhalla seems like a good one. I'll just see what it looks like running on the new TV. And that just brought me down a rabbit hole where now I'm back into it in a way that I thought that I'd be into Immortals. But Valhalla, there's still a lot of fun to be had there. Still fun to be had.
Just to humiliate myself.
Yeah.
Live on stream. I'm looking through my Steam library. I'm pretty sure the only games I've beaten this year are Last of Us, Half-Life Alyx, and Avengers.
No shame here, man. No shame here. You've played enough. You've played enough. You can rest. Zach Killian.
I'm going to eat you.
Oh no, he's gone. Zach Killian says, hello, MinnMax. I was going through some old boxes recently and found a few old strategy guides I had back in the day. Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, and Mass Effect. What strategy guides did you all own? And more specifically, what was the last strategy guide you purchased? This is such a good question.
Yeah. The last strategy guide I purchased was like the last guide that it was like, all right, what was the last guide that I could buy before I understood how to work the internet? So it was literally like the Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire guide was the last guide that my parents bought for me. But ever since then, it was like, okay, just gonna look it up.
Nothing wrong with that. I think I didn't buy too many. I certainly liked leafing through them at friends' houses and stuff, but I think Xenosaga Episode 1, Zerwildermacht, was the last one I bought. And I didn't like it because I got too addicted to it and was just glued to that thing throughout the whole experience. And I didn't really like that experience of going through an RPG like that.
Yeah, I was definitely the guy who did that a lot growing up, where I would just like basically buy what are I think I don't know if it was Prima, but it was some company called Versus Books that I think would release like their perfect guides for Pokemon, and it would straight up break down like, okay, here's every encounter, here's all the Pokemon they're using and their level, so I would know what I was getting into. So I followed that stuff pretty religiously. But I think the last guide that I ended up buying was the Street Fighter Cross Tekken guide.
Oh, weird.
But I used it as like reference because they had like all the frame data, which ended up being kind of irrelevant a couple months in. But I bought that and kind of like was sitting here like mathematically figuring out combos and stuff, which was kind of interesting, but probably not a thing that you can feasibly do now because those games get updated so quickly. What
is your read on Street Fighter Cross Tekken? Correctly rated, underrated, overrated?
I think it was correctly rated more as like the first big like Capcom screw up post Street Fighter 4 in terms of like their marketing, because it was like one of the first cases where it's like, oh, the DLC is on the disc, how dare they? I think the gem system wasn't like as good as they needed it to be because it just felt like really either ridiculously broken or not interesting bonuses that you could give your characters. But yeah, I think the combo system in that game is one of, if not my favorite combo system in a game ever, because it felt like this really cool combination of Street Fighter and like just it felt like a really broken version of Street Fighter where it's like, oh yeah, that just combos now. Like you can just break, like these two characters basically give you whatever you want, you can do whatever. But I liked it more than a lot of people, but I totally get why people just did not click with that game.
Yeah, there it is, everybody. Write it down. Preston Wilkie says, hey, Icebox and the Little Giants, that's us. My wife and I are moving north this summer. We're from Houston, so any north is too cold at our current level. We're asking for must-have cold weather items for our family for Christmas. So at this point, what are your favorite go-to, old reliable cold weather wear? Long johns, down vest, sweet trench coat? Need to know. You will need one sweet trench coat, and your entire family needs to fit in it, Preston.
Family-sized trench coat, yeah.
That's right.
Practice walking as a group now before we go.
That's right. You can only get it at Duluth Trading Company. Leo?
I got some long johns from none other than Uniqlo.
Leo?
A couple years back. You got to get comfortable long johns. You'll know. You'll look like you're wearing regular pants, but you'll know you're wearing some pajama pants every single day, and it'll be the pride and joy of your life.
You're going to make me go back to buy some, because after you're raving about Uniqlo, who's definitely not a sponsor, they'll never be. A couple weeks ago on the podcast, I went and checked them out, and they had on their site, what is it, like, not heated pants, but basically cold resistant pants. I think they call them like heat tech. Mm-hmm. And so I bought a pair, wearing them today, went for a walk for the first time. Game changer. Like growing up in Minnesota, I'm just used to most days, unless you have snow pants on, walking around outside, your legs are going to be just a little uncomfortable, that 10% uncomfortable. And removing that, what a delight.
That's awesome.
So
Glad to hear that.
Thank you for changing my pants.
Leo, I need to ask an important clarifying question. Do you wear just long johns out?
No, but
Okay.
you won't be contacting your other pants, it doesn't make a difference what those do.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I just wanted to make sure it's unclear. But I can also, a third recommender of the heat tech. Like, I have their shirts and their long johns, and they're really nice. I'm actually wearing a Uniqlo, like heat fleece. Turtleneck thing right now.
Nice.
It's taken over.
There you go. Also, other piece of advice, always mittens over gloves. Like any day of the week, mittens over gloves. Like I'll fight you on that one.
I got those gloves that have like the
choppers.
What?
Chopper. Never mind.
Oh, no, not choppers. No. Like they have like the smartphone sensitive tips or whatever, so you can still use your phone. And then they stopped working. Did those just like fade with time, or is something wrong with my body and phone?
I don't think they fade. I feel like I have like a similar thing with like the little kind of like
tippy tips,
moisture tips. Yeah. And I think those still work as far as I know, but maybe I haven't used them for, a year or so. So
well, check them out again.
We'll find out. Yeah.
People in the Backstage Pass chat talking about the trouble with gloves. Gloves never really keeping your hands warm if you have to actually contact snow. I definitely do recommend these hot hand super warmers. As part of your winter accessories. They're just little sandbags. You shake them to activate them, and you just put them in your gloves. And they're good for biking and stuff, and for gaming when you got to warm up those fingers in the chilly dead of night.
Woo! James Smith writes in and says, "Hey, Hanson and the Hound Dogs. Let's play Crusader Kings 3 patch notes, real or fake?" Leo, you're not looking at this, are you?
I accidentally looked at the first one, but I haven't seen any others.
Okay. Is this a real patch note or not for Crusader Kings 3? Surreal. Children can become more inclined to drink later in life if their guardians are a poor influence. Real or fake patch note?
I'm going to say fake.
That is real. Anna, wards will no longer apologize after an unsuccessful assassination attempt.
Fake.
Correct. God, you get it. Leo, the Cucumber King is no longer unintentionally a kinslayer due to a wrongly assigned father.
Cucumber King. That one is fake.
That is real, of course.
What took him so long? He has about like 6 months.
Surreal. Characters are no longer angry at their new friends.
Want to say real?
That's real. Anna, fixed a child's favorite toy, crashing the entire game.
Real?
That is real. Leo, the Pope can no longer initiate a holy war on the player's faction.
Fake.
That is fake. Oh, you know your Crusader Kings.
Yeah,
Surreal.
You should definitely be able to do that.
Surreal, please answer this. Please. If you try to make too many children, your wards... if you try to make too many children your wards, you'll now be told off in a strongly worded letter.
I'm going to say fake.
Sorry, that's real. Anna, intelligent women no longer confront their pregnant lesbian lover to ask if they are the father of that child. Stupid women, however, still have a chance to ask that question.
I'm gonna go with what I hope to be true, which is real.
That is an actual patch note for Crusader Kings 3. Thank you, James Smith, for writing in.
Because they definitely added the same sex relationship, so I was right. It's feasible. It's feasible.
Thank you so much for all the great questions and comments this week. What stands out? What do you think is question of the week?
I liked the question about strategy guides.
The cannibal question was good.
Which I guess started with the comment about
elderly
soup.
gaming was nice.
Yeah, those are probably the two. I think either cannibals or the elderly. I think.
Wait, but it wasn't a cannibal question. What was the original question?
The question was dunk
weird
peanut butter
stuff,
in
right?
soup.
Oh, it was peanut butter soup.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
Naturally,
natural progression. Yeah,
I think you gotta give it to peanut butter and soup for where it led us, right?
Yeah, I mean,
All right. Congratulations, Michael Lynch. You win I'm 8-Bit's prize of the Cuphead double album. Way to go. You can submit a question in the future for us to read, and you can have a chance to win as well. If you support us in tier on Patreon, submit a question. Now it's time for something we call Get a Load of This.
Get a load of this.
Oh, new outro. Take
That
it
was
away,
my Western. That's not Western. Okay.
What?
Get a load of. I'm sorry. I was
Your
like, that's
country
an
Western?
accent, but it's not. Get a load of this. This person who goes by the username Lumpy Touch turned Among Us into a Game Boy game. Made a video. It's very fun, very cute. Like the aesthetic matches the Game Boy game era very nicely, and made a little chiptune soundtrack to go as well. So, yeah,
That's fun. Does he do anything with like the link cable to show off multiplayer, or is it just implied?
Oh, there's no link cable as far as I know. I think it's more just like a thing that looks cool.
Yeah. That's fun.
yeah.
The links are in the description below for everybody. Mine is just the tidbit that two of the old-timer leads from Sony Bend have left the studio. The studio that made Uncharted Golden Abyss, most recently Days Gone, but Jeff Ross and John Garvin both left, and they've been there for a long time. John Garvin in particular, he was at that studio since 1997. I mean, he was the writer, creative director for Siphon Filter, those games. Just a real old-timer. Fun fact as well, before he got to the studio that made Days Gone was technically the same studio that made Bubsy 3D. So he got there right after Bubsy 3D shipped. But it was so shocking when I visited that studio back at Game Informer. It was lovely. Bend, Oregon was great. But just talking about Days Gone with him and realizing that, like, oh, John Garvin just wrote that game. Like, very rarely in AAA productions is it just, one guy wrote it, but he's been around for so long. It's interesting to see those two leave at this time and what that studio is up to next. I think it'll be nice to get some fresh blood in there, some new faces. And they have hired 2 senior writers that you can find on LinkedIn. And these senior writers started last year, and it's a husband and wife. And they both say they created the mythology, world rules, characters, and complete story for a AAA open world title. So it seems to be strongly implying, at least, that Sony Bend will be working on new IP. That's open world new IP. So I'm excited to see what they're up to next. And God, it seems like it'll be a while before it's fully operational. So hopefully they didn't have to let a lot of folks go, or maybe they can produce kind of like a Lost Legacy small game before this new IP comes out. But still cool to see some friendly turnover there, I guess, at Sony Bend. Surreal?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a total 180 from that. This is actually from a couple weeks ago, but I found it relevant still. This is from Blake at Neil Nevins, who said on Twitter, I feel like Gen Z wouldn't believe this was an unedited image from a real commercial that played several times a day across primetime network television. Now, and this was, do any of you know about the sandwich chain Quiznos?
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
Yeah, it's great. Good.
Do you remember those weird ass commercials they had
with the monkey?
I don't know if they were monkeys or like hamsters or whatever.
Oh, yes.
They're guinea pigs. And it was just like, they would they had like human mouths and eyes, and they would like just manipulate. It was like 30 seconds of just them going like singing these weird songs that are basically full of non sequiturs and just saying like, yeah, like we love the subs. The subs are great. We cook them. We have other stuff. And then it would cut to like, yeah, Quiznos has subs now, and like they to the rest of the regular commercial.
Yeah.
And I watched one of those ads, and it is the weirdest thing still. It is so odd that they almost went to like Adult Swim levels of weird irony. And this was in like the mid 2000s, like before this stuff was so prominent.
It was ahead of the curve. Like it beat Old Spice to it. It beat that entire kind of ironic wave of commercials for sure.
Yeah, and it is still wild to watch these commercials. So I definitely, if this is like a throwback Thursday, you know, if this is Wednesday for you, then just keep quiet about, or
Please
pretend it's Thursday. Quiet. But yeah, really weird to think about some of the ads that were out there back then.
That's so strange. Leo?
Well, get a load of this. Forget Suriel's Quiznos ad. Get a load of it. Look at all that. Check out Subway's Uncharted 3 TV promo.
What?
Amazing coincidence. Yeah, it's just a 15-second little TV spot for Subway with Uncharted 3 gameplay. They edited a couple set pieces from Uncharted 3 so Nolan North as Nathan Drake has a Subway plastic cup in his hand, and you got Nolan North going like, "Buy it Subway!" while he's falling out of the plane. It's pretty fun. Subway's Uncharted 3 TV promo.
No, that's art. We have a wonderful community Discord that shares a bunch of get-a-loads of this. I don't know how you pluralize that in a channel. It's just a nonstop drip of good stuff. Fontelroy submitted a get-a-load of this. It's an article from Kotaku called "The Xbox Series X Can Run PlayStation 2 Games." And the article reads, both the Xbox Series S and X have a developer mode users can activate, which can let you run UWP apps. That's an application designed to be able to run not just in Windows 10, but Xbox and Windows 10 mobile as well. That includes RetroArch, a famous front end for various emulators, which means that with a minimum of fuss, anyone with one of Microsoft's new consoles can kick back and play, say, a PlayStation 2 game or something from the GameCube library, if you prefer that instead. So apparently, it's going to be very easy to emulate stuff on the Xbox. I'm curious to see how popular that becomes.
Yeah, that seems pretty cool and feasible. I don't know how, like, if doing that gets your Xbox immediately banned and you have to retrofit it, but it feels like you can just go between the two modes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more, but what a funky, weird thing. But thanks everybody that submits great stuff in that Discord all the time. That's it, everybody. That's an episode of the MinnMax Show. Let's see. Stuff coming up. We have a new episode of Better Quest, the show all about getting better with Jeff Cork. That's going to be going live for $20 and $10 supporters and above on Thursday at 7 p.m. Central. And then it'll be up for everybody on YouTube the next day. But if you want to call in and talk to us about getting better, setting a personal goal for December, you can jump up to that $20 tier on Patreon. We'd love to have some new voices. So looking forward to those calls. But before that airs on Thursday on...
Yeah, we have a very exciting episode of Refreshed. We're going to be talking to the developers of the absurdist online community-run video game Blaseball. It's a baseball simulator, and they're starting their new season, so we're doing a bit of a season kickoff with them, which is very fun. And it'll just be like a nice open conversation. And if you're not familiar with Blaseball, like maybe go check it out. Cause again, could also be under those underrated games. But I feel like it got a decent amount of buzz. So
yeah, I was amazed by the buzz of you announcing that. It's like, there is a Blaseball community that showed the hell up on Twitter, at least. It's like, what is happening here?
Yeah, no, it's a really active, really kind, great community, super involved, because it is like at its heart, it's a community run game. And so it's kind of like this weird go between where the developers like actually they do a decent amount to maintain it, but like definitely the game as it is today wouldn't exist if it weren't for such passionate fans. So I was happy to see them excited for the show.
Yeah, so that'll be on Twitch streaming at 6 p.m. Central on Thursday. You can jump in and ask a question in the chat. The archive will also be up on YouTube the next day, and the show, as always, is in the Patreon exclusive podcast feed as well. Also in that feed, you can find a new episode of MinnMax every single Monday, our community Q&A podcast. And last Sunday, we had best friend Ronnie, which if you've watched the deepest dive on like Final Fantasy VII Remake or some other odds and ends on our YouTube channel, you might be acquainted with. But he joined for a couple hours as we took a bunch of calls from the community. So everybody on YouTube demanding more best friend Ronnie. It's on that episode of MinnMax, so please check that out and let us know what you think. Hey, Leo.
Hey.
I personally would like to thank all of our $50 supporters on Patreon by reading off their name on each and every episode of the podcast. But what if you read it off?
Am I ready? I don't know if I'm ready.
I believe in you.
Thanks to the following Patreon supporters for their generous support of MinnMax at the $50 tier. Sync Up Podcast, I am 8-Bit, Mirko, Rico, Terreno, Rich McLaughlin, Zachary Pliggy, Rebecca Lang, Beatdown, Brian Mark, Saliga, Jawar Hello, Ludwig Roque, Andrew Valla, Jesse Vitelli, Super Serious Sam, Snake24, Thomas Hoster, Yarrow, Spiral in Your Eyes, Richard Smuts, JT Fells, Preetham Yarrow Legata, Clint Farley, Spider Dan, Steve Bamdad, Slick Nick. Thank you all so much.
That's
Be good,
amazing.
everyone. Let's go.
Bye, everybody.